My name is not Chris Denaro, as co-chair of the Water Response Task Force. I am Bill Kameza, the other co-chair, but I am reading from Chris's notes, so you have to go along with me if I make any mistakes. But I'm calling this public meeting to order at 5 p.m., well, at 5:02 p.m. I'll now take a roll call of the task force members and ask them to identify themselves. Ann?
Oh, Ann Clifford, Town of Concord and non-voting member.
Yep.
Nikhil.
Mark Howell, Select Board.
Bill Kameza,
Bert Coleman's staff.
Delia K, staff.
Rachel Freed, CBI.
Toby Berkman, CBI.
and then to the people online.
Paul Bohm.
Malcolm Bryant.
Sven Viva.
Jeff Collins.
Anyone else? And of course, yes.
Bill,
and
I'm
Bruce.
Anyone else? Me, Bill.
Absolutely. And Bruce, that's terrific. All right.
Emily Cummings, EA Engineering. Oh, sorry. I thought,
Not yet, not yet.
Oh,
You don't
sorry.
need to- That's okay. That's all right. So our main goal for tonight is clarifying the paths towards forward for work groups. And you can see our agenda on the slide here. And at around 7:20, we'll open the meeting to public comment as noted in the agenda. The meeting is being recorded and a video link will be posted to the task force website in a few days. We've drafted, by the way, we have drafted a letter to the bridge about the public workshop, and it should be in this edition this week. And we did our best to incorporate your input on this. So having said that, I asked you to review the minutes from June 13th and June 27th and see if anyone has anything they want to change or amend with any of those minutes. So I can have a motion to approve the June 13th minutes.
We approved the June 13th minutes.
In a second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Need a vote.
I knew you were gonna say that, or I need a voice vote. Bruce?
Non-voting
Oh, you're right, non-voting member.
Yes, Vicky.
Vicky,
Mark, yes.
Bill Kameza, who else do we have?
Online.
Online,
Sven.
Sven,
Aye.
Malcolm,
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
So anyone I'm missing?
You got Paul.
I think I said Paul.
Aye.
Yeah, all right. Any oppositions? All right, those minutes have been approved. Now, do I have a motion to approve the June 27th minutes?
We approved the June 27th minutes.
And a second?
Second.
Second, all right, all those in favor? Vicky,
Vicky, aye.
Aye.
Bill Kameza, aye. Who else?
Malcolm Bryant, aye.
Malcolm, thank you. Paul,
Paul Bohm. Aye.
Sven,
Aye.
and Jeff.
Aye.
And
Oh, we haven't had a chance even to look at this. That's right. But Liz, would you approve of the minutes?
Yes.
All right, yes, okay, good. There you are, thank you. Okay, the minutes have been approved. Let's see what else we have to do now. Okay, so now we move on to a discussion about the side channel. And Rachel, I think you're going to introduce the remarks about this?
Yes, and before we start, I just want to let everybody know that we are going to try very hard to end tonight's meeting at 7:30. And that would be including the 10 minutes for public comment. We want at the same time to let you have discussions if they go longer. And so what we'll do is just step in to remind you of the time. And if there's something that you're really intent on finishing a discussion on, we will try to shift things around, or we might hold off on continuing the conversation until later in the meeting, because there are some really important things that we need to get to tonight, including, and maybe especially, the whole work group discussion. We're really trying to hew to timely meetings and try to keep, respecting people's time, but also give you time at the same time, so to speak. Okay, with that being said, I want to reintroduce Alex Patterson from EA and Emily Cummings from EA. Alex is a senior ecologist and project manager. Emily is the project engineer. And they are here to talk about the side channel proposal and give you their review of that idea, the concept, feasibility, permittability, potential cost issues related to that. So take it away, Alex and Evelyn.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. I've got some slides prepared. Would you like me to share my screen and I can share those?
Yes.
Okay. Just, bear with me for a moment. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So as Rachel mentioned, my name's Alex Patterson. I'm here with my colleague Emily Cummings from EA Engineering. We pulled together a few slides just to support this conversation. But just to recap, we were asked to review a slide presentation describing this side channel idea for Warner's Pond and Neshoba Brook. And we were asked to provide sort of our professional opinion and thoughts about this idea with regard to sort of these 5 topics: engineering considerations, ecological, regulatory feasibility, cost, and potential for negative outcomes. And so that's what we're mainly going to be focusing on, and be happy to answer any questions after I get through these slides, which hopefully will only take about 10 or 15 minutes. And so firstly, just to kind of establish kind of a baseline understanding, again, we were provided a slide presentation that was prepared about this idea. That's what sort of all of our discussion here is based on. But basically, the idea entails constructing a series of berms essentially through Warner's Pond and around Warner's Pond, basically to try to redirect the flow of Neshoba Brook and isolate Warner's Pond from Neshoba Brook. And the reason for doing this, that's stated in the presentation, is primarily to reduce inputs of sediment and nutrients to Warner's Pond. And then the presentation further states that the berms would be created using material dredged from the pond. So first, we'll go over some kind of thoughts we had on engineering considerations and constructability for this idea. And so I guess firstly, I guess the idea of using dredged sediments to create these berms, we sort of were unsure about the feasibility of that. Any material that would be dredged out of the pond that would then be used to construct berms or any other kind of engineered structures would require kind of extensive handling. It would need to be dewatered and then amended with other materials to provide kind of the strength necessary for serving the purpose that it would be used for. So it's not necessarily that it's couldn't be done, but just wanted to kind of point out that it wouldn't necessarily be as simple as just kind of pushing the material into a berm shape. It would need to be kind of removed from the pond, dewatered, amended, and then kind of put back into place in this kind of strategic way. And then related to that, we did some kind of rough calculations using the orientation of the berms in the presentation. And, with these kind of assumptions about the size and things like that, it just seems like the amount of material you would actually need to construct these features would be not very much compared to the 2 other dredge alternatives that have been talked about in the past, for example. And even if that number, of 5,400 cubic yards would include a lot of amendments. So not all of that would just be material dredged from the pond. So continuing on, as far as engineering considerations go, the presentation does talk about whether or not removing the dam would be necessary, and we sort of feel that it would be, mainly because if the dam weren't removed, you would just essentially be creating a new impoundment in the kind of part of the brook that is separated from where Warner's Pond is now, which could, result in flooding impacts to properties, mainly along the western and southern parts of the system. And so I think we just wanted to point out that we see that as kind of being integral to the whole concept, that some form of kind of dam removal or breaching would kind of have to happen. And then I kind of touched on this a little bit before, but the whole process of kind of constructing this would be fairly complex. It would require multiple different cofferdams that would need to be installed. I think probably the way that seems to make the most sense would be that the material would be dredged hydraulically, similar to previous kind of ideas for dredging the pond and dewatered sort of outside the basin. But then in order to actually construct the berms, you'd have to install a series of cofferdams to kind of dewater those parts of the pond and the wetlands next to the pond where the berms would actually be constructed. And so it's just there would be a lot of kind of different elements and steps in the construction process and kind of things about the system that would make it somewhat complex. And so all those things just kind of add to the overall cost. Sort of the more complex something is for construction, generally, the higher the costs end up being. And then, just a note, I didn't notice this necessarily in the presentation, but we think that some kind of armoring with riprap or other kind of hardened materials might be needed to protect the berms and adjacent shorelines from erosion. Basically, once the brook is separated from the pond, the kind of floodplain of Neshoba Brook would be much smaller, but you'd have the same amount of water kind of moving through that area. And so you'd be having higher velocities and then that just kind of increases the risk of erosion and kind of issues with that type of thing. And then lastly, as far as engineering considerations go, we're just not sure that if these berms were built in the locations that are proposed, that the brook would just kind of automatically start flowing along these proposed flow paths sort of on its own, and especially the primary flow path that's proposed, which is the solid blue line, goes through an area of upland that's kind of circled in red there. So and that would definitely require some pretty extensive excavation and dredging if that were to be sort of the main flow path. Even the secondary flow path that's proposed, which is the dash blue line, we feel like would probably require some amount of dredging to just get the channel to kind of move in that direction efficiently and not sort of cool up or just kind of flow directly towards the berm, because right now the main flow path would kind of go perpendicular to where those northern berms are, and so the channel might need some kind of reconfiguring to make it start going in a different direction. And then to switch gears a little in terms of ecological considerations, so we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but just all the extensive kind of water management and cofferdam installation and other kind of construction aspects that would be required to do this would entail a pretty significant kind of temporary construction phase impacts in the system, which could be detrimental to fish and wildlife in the ponds. But as far as longer term things, we feel like there's a high risk that water quality in sort of what is left of Warner's Pond could be degraded if this were to move forward, mainly because the sort of regular flushing that the pond receives now from the stream, while it does carry a sediment and nutrient load, it also kind of replaces the water relatively quickly. And so that kind of oxygenates the system, keeps water temperatures lower than they would otherwise be, and provides the other benefits like that. And so if the pond were isolated and basically wasn't receiving any kind of surface flows anymore, we feel like stagnation would be a pretty major concern that could cause DO levels to drop, and kind of all sorts of bad things related to aquatic life related to that. Also, the presentation seems to suggest that one of the major issues is nutrient inputs from septic systems to the west of the pond, but that's typically not sort of the major driving factor in kind of what is contributing nutrients to aquatic systems. It's certainly possible that there are failing septic systems around the pond and they could be contributing nutrients, but even if, you know, the pond were isolated from those sources, you would still have kind of internal nutrient cycling from the pond sediments, and also there would continue to still be a watershed surrounding the pond, mainly from the north and west, or the north and east, that would sort of continue having surface flows of nutrients from that watershed into the system. So we're just not clear that this would really provide a level of benefit that would justify kind of the potential impacts. We'll get more into this later, but I think we're really not confident that the pond level could be maintained from groundwater inputs, which is what the presentation suggests would be the case. But I'll get more into that later. But basically, I think our overall take is that this idea kind of poses significant risk for adverse impacts, mainly to water quality, habitat, and other functions, and that the potential benefits are probably far outweighed by those risks. And so in terms of regulatory feasibility, I guess the overall take that we have is that there's very little pathway for this project to be permitted in Massachusetts. I'm sure, as everyone here knows, Massachusetts is one of the kind of most restrictive wetlands regulations in the country. And I think basically there's a number of reasons why we feel like the project wouldn't have a kind of a realistic pathway for gaining regulatory approvals that, you know, we can go into in more detail, but it does appear that it would require a variance under the Wetlands Protection Act, and in general that means that unless the project is kind of a very clear overriding public benefit with sort of no alternatives, there really isn't a path forward. It would also, the construction of these berms would entail a significant amount of fill in the regulatory floodplain, which is regulated by FEMA, and it's not clear that FEMA would permit that, given that it would likely increase flood levels by doing that. And then, you know, just briefly on cost, you know, we really didn't have that much to go off of and so we didn't really go through sort of a detailed analysis here, but just sort of best professional judgment, kind of our understanding of what this work would entail and experience with other projects. We feel that the cost would be much higher than either of the alternatives that were considered in the alternatives analysis, at least. Just kind of intuitively, because this idea would entail both dredging and dam breaching, as I mentioned previously. And so as a result, the cost for doing that would be at least as high as, if not more so than doing either of those activities on their own. And then, like I mentioned before, using the dredge material to create the berms, we don't really feel would significantly reduce the costs because of all the additional handling and amendments that would be required to use that. And then lastly, as far as sort of potential for unintended negative outcomes, so these are things that, always try to look for in any project and just try to kind of think about things that may happen that aren't necessarily part of what's the project is designed to do, but that are kind of the risks of undertaking the work. And I think that one of the overarching issues that we see is that Warner's Pond and Neshoba Brook are really one and the same kind of entity. The pond is really just a flooded section of the Brook's floodplain that exists because of the dam. And the idea that, you could kind of separate the pond from the brook and thereby provide some kind of ecological or recreational benefits just doesn't really sort of kind of sound right to us, for that reason. Again, the pond is really part of the brook. They're just kind of one and the same. And kind of related to that, the more sort of highly engineered a system is, the greater the risk of sort of failure or issues and costs for maintenance. And the system is already somewhat engineered by the presence of the dam. But the construction of these berms across the floodplain and removal of a significant amount of the floodplain of the brook, and kind of having to likely reorient the stream to go where it would need to go, just adds a lot of complexity and kind of potential for things to go wrong. But I mentioned earlier about sort of how the pond would actually be maintained, and I think this is kind of one of the most fundamental concerns that we had sort of identified with this idea. And so, as I mentioned, the presentation states that the pond basically would be filled with groundwater, and it specifically cites Walden Pond as an example of another instance where this is the case. And it's certainly true that Walden Pond and also White Pond in Concord are groundwater fed systems, but I think it's really important to understand that natural kettle ponds like Walden and White Pond are just fundamentally different types of systems than Warner's Pond. Warner's Pond, at least in the state that we know it today, really exists only due to the presence of the dam that is impounding the flow of Neshoba Brook, causing sort of a permanently flooded condition. And if the pond were separated from the brook, or if the dam were removed, we just feel that Warner's Pond would not exist, and in anywhere close to the state that we see it today. So we took a look at, just to try to, I guess, give some evidence for this. I mean, if you look at the depth of Walden Pond and White Pond, they're 8 and 5 times deeper than Warner's Pond, respectively. but essentially close to the same size and as far as surface area. I mean, Walden is a little bit bigger and White Pond is a little smaller, but they're both significantly deeper, and so there's just a much greater intersection with the groundwater, and kind of the surface area of the bottom of the pond underwater, if you will, is much larger than Warner's Pond. And we feel that if this were to move forward and Warner's Pond were basically disconnected from the brook, that water levels would decline significantly, and it would be, I think, difficult to predict really whether or how much water would be maintained in the basin at all. And so just to summarize, we kind of tried to think about what conditions in the system would look like sort of following construction if this project were to go through to construction. And basically, I think we feel that once the pond is kind of separated from the source of water that maintains it, water levels would decline significantly and basically just be subject to kind of seasonal variations as kind of the water table goes up and down as a result of precipitation and changing seasons each year. And then sort of what remains of Warner's Pond as far as water quality, we feel there's, as I said, a significant risk of that being degraded as a result of stagnation causing decreased dissolved oxygen concentrations and increased temperatures, and potential for fish kills and algae blooms as a result of that. As I mentioned, dam removal we feel would be integral to this, so that would restore fish passage through Neshoba Brook, but the brook would be flowing through a significantly smaller floodplain, which would cause water's velocities to increase and increase the risk of erosion and flooding. But all that being said, again, we feel that due to the potential negative impacts and probably lack of significant benefit, that there's very little sort of realistic pathway for permitting this project. We feel that the cost for implementing it would be significantly higher than the options considered in the alternatives analysis. And overall, we feel like the risk of negative impacts is much higher than the potential for benefits. And so that's all we had as far as slides go. As I said, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Before there are questions, Rachel, I do want to recognize John Coleman, who's here with us. John, thank you for being here. And obviously your idea was intriguing enough for us to think about this in much more depth. So you can see why we're doing this right now. There are, Rachel.
I just wanted to preface before we open it to questions to just remind everyone, which I'm sure you all remember, in the last task force meeting, the question about whether there should be another work group for the side channel option was kind of a sticking issue that precipitated us asking EA to come in to talk about this in more depth. So I would suggest that, certainly ask any questions that you have to clarify what you've heard, but bear in mind that it's really a question of going forward about whether you think there should be a fourth work group or not. That would be kind of the next topic of discussion.
Yeah.
So take it away. Questions?
Comments, questions?
So, seems like the best option. No, there's nothing. So in all honesty, I'm just thinking about sort of the watershed where I'm the executive director and they had all the channels. And this sounds like a channel system.
Yeah.
And it has been nothing but problems. Looking back and forth, because even with the sort of the potential dams and the damming, even if you try to do sort of like a board damming system to let things flow through.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It's the overgrowth, even with riprap, there's no way around not having it, in all honesty,
Yeah,
for the erosion, because it said possibly, there's no way around it.
Yeah.
The erosion will happen. And we've seen them flood, even though they were boarded off so no water could get through, and then the stagnation created all kinds of other issues. It's just one of those things that it's like looking at the channel. It really reminds me of
Yeah.
basically what we have on Blackstone.
yeah.
Paul has his hand up.
Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Alex and EA, thank you. You've done an excellent, quick job with good professional background. And I know this is not a detailed engineering study, but you make some really good points. I do have a question though on available knowledge. When you talk about groundwater, I don't disagree with what you found, but have there been any hydrogeology studies of Warner's Pond, groundwater flow, any hydrogeology? I haven't seen any. I'm not sure how, I'm not recommending we do that here. I'm just wondering in general, as background material for the task force, do we know anything about the hydrogeology of the surrounding areas and the flows of groundwater?
I don't know of any specific studies. I mean, there's a little bit of kind of publicly available data that you could get from NRCS about, soils and kind of superficial geology around the pond and anywhere else in the state, which I guess could give you a little bit of an idea. But I don't know of any specific studies that have looked into that for Warner's Pond.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
I'm caught on the notion that the water transfers in and out within 24 hours. That suggests that it's it seems to me that it's overwhelmingly coming from the streams, I would think, from the Neshoba and Fort Pond Brook. I think Jeff had his hand up. Jeff?
Thank you. Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Alex and Emily. Alex, as you described in the presentation, if the berms separate the pond as a floodplain or flood storage area from the brook, would that permitting wise be looked at as the same as filling in a floodplain, filling in flood storage capacity? We're removing flood storage capacity from the system. And if you do that by filling, you have to mitigate that, replace, which A is a bad idea, B has to be done at double or some number you guys could tell us. So do you think beyond sort of permitters, reviewers looking at this and questioning whether this is the best approach, there's no alternative, do you think separating the pond from the brook would represent removal of flood storage capacity that we would need to replicate?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so, I think it's important to understand, and let me go back to my first slide just so we can look at a map. So the brook comes down from kind of the top left in the picture and then flows into the pond and then leaves kind of in the bottom right. And so everything that you're seeing there, the pond and all the surrounding wetlands are part of the floodplain of Neshoba Brook. And so, if we get like an inch of rain, water levels in that whole system go up by an inch. But for a short time. So, yeah, I mean, I think, if you were to disconnect, a couple dozen acres of the Brook's floodplain, it's not exactly the same as kind of a normal system where, because it is impounded and so it's already holding water, so it doesn't have the same, because it's already flooded, it doesn't have the same amount of flood storage capacity as if it weren't flooded. But I think it certainly would, the bottom line, I think, is that the same amount of water is coming down Neshoba Brook regardless. And so if you cut off sort of a significant amount of the floodplain, that amount of water kind of has to flow through a much smaller confined space. And that kind of necessarily means that velocities are going to go up and risk of flooding goes up. So I think that's a key issue that would be a real challenge for trying to permit this is, between FEMA and DEP, I think they're gonna look at this and say, we don't see how this could possibly be done without increasing the risk of flooding. And that basically is kind of a project killer right there.
Yeah, and just to expand on what Alex stated, and kind of also, I think part of what your question was relating to like permit applications and what kinds of things we would need to show or offsets. I can't speak to the exact offset we would need if we were to fill the floodplain, but I will say that when we complete those applications, as Alex mentioned, showing the FEMA floodplain maps, we submit those to the Army Corps, usually state DEP, and we would have to show or project the changes in floodplain and the changes in flood level as it would be under a proposed construction condition. So, you know, and one of the things Alex was also kind of getting to with this restriction of the floodplain is that it would shift where it's currently flooding. So, you know, our 100-year floodplain, for example, let's say that's coming right around the edge of the wetland. If we start filling in and moving that floodplain, it'll start pushing the floodplain further to the south and southwest. So you'll get an inundation area that will start changing and impacting some other properties. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you both.
Any other questions, comments from commission, from our task force members? So I think, I know we did talk about moving this towards a vote as to whether or not we're gonna make this into a fourth work group. I frankly would entertain it. As much as this intriguing this is, I would entertain, I think, a motion either for, at first, personally, I think I would entertain a motion. I can, as chair, make the motion to not make this into a fourth group. And so I wonder if anyone wants to make that motion, and we can take a second and a vote. Liz,
I think I make a motion to establish the three.
three work groups. A second, anyone?
I'll second that.
It's been seconded. Any comments or discussion from our members?
I think the only comment I would have is that there are components of this that I think are quite interesting, and I think
Absolutely.
they should be considered as part of those three.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think, I don't want to say that it's, a dead idea,
No, I'm sure.
but
there's
it
some
should be
questions.
incorporated into all three of those work groups should think about what this might mean to them.
Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. I agree with that.
Good point.
Yeah, 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 there'll be
Or
elements.
might
I'm sure.
help them, right? It might help solve
Yeah,
some part of the problem.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely, whether it's dredging and the main body or, yeah, absolutely. So having said that, are we ready for a vote then? All those in favor of just having our three work groups? So I'll start, let's see, Anne?
I'm
with you?
not a voting
Oh,
member.
that's right, voting member.
Yes.
Okay, Vicky, that's right. All right, Vicky, here we go. Vicky,
Hi,
aye. Liz,
I.
Mark,
Aye.
I'm an aye.
I'm an I.
Aye. Paul,
Aye.
let's see, who else? Sven
Aye.
and Jeff,
Aye.
Malcolm.
Aye.
Anyone else I'm missing? Then it's been unanimous, the members who are here. Right, thank you, everyone.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
moving on.
Great, so moving on and we are.
Thank you, Alex
Yeah,
and.
Alex, yeah, thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Alex.
And John,
Emily.
thank you. I really, you created an intriguing notion for us to think through further about this. That was really good. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Okay,
Toby?
so we're gonna press forward into the next set of items on our agenda, which is a discussion on work groups. So at this point, there are really kind of three main items for us to talk about and resolve as a group. So we've already addressed this issue of 3 versus 4. We've decided on 3. The next issue we might want to talk about is membership. And we can put forward to you some of the previous input that you gave us on work group membership and have a discussion on who would like to be in what work groups. An additional conversation is simply what these work groups are going to specifically be working on, and if we want to set some kind of check-in deadlines, right, plan on sharing what's coming out of the conversations at certain meetings, so kind of what we're going to work on and by when. And then we also want to share some background on and make sure that there's clarity on some open meeting law questions and issues related to the work groups. So I think we're happy to address those in any order. I think we plan to talk about membership first, since we know what the 3 work groups are, and it's an important item. But if there are any concerns about that, we obviously can go in a different order, but hearing no one, we can do that. So I'm gonna share on my screen a slide, which is basically, if you recall. Sorry,
Toby?
Yeah, oh, go ahead, absolutely.
Just a clarification on the term short-term actions pathways. I think I know what that means, but is it really the no action pathway with short-term management? Can you explain that a little bit?
I'd be happy to take a shot at
Go
it.
ahead.
I'll
Yeah.
try. Paul, my sense would be, it's not aimed at dredging and it's not aimed at dam removal. And so it's aimed as a holding action that would be addressing the issues that we could do on a yearly basis to improve or to at least to mitigate any more damage to the pond. That's how I see it. It could include everything from weed management by, herbicides to drawdown, perhaps, to, anything you can do on an annual basis to sort of hold the line in the eutrophication. That's how I see it.
And as a guide, the 2012 report that we looked at, there were a lot of items listed there, so anything there is fair game as well.
Correct, yeah.
So,
Right.
Is that-
Just the
someone
last
else?
question. So is that a short-term alternative or is that a permanent alternative? That basically no major action, the pond is maintained through ongoing short-term actions. Just want to know what
Well,
the duration of that option is.
well, I think it's a current proposal. I think it's one that holds things for a while. It doesn't mean that in 8 years, when MCI has a proposal, that there wouldn't be another proposal that would be offered then. It doesn't mean this is forever and ever and ever. It doesn't mean we'll never remove the dam. It doesn't mean we'll never dredge. It doesn't mean we'll never have skating on the pond. It doesn't mean we'll never have a boat launch. It just means that this is what we're proposing.
That's how I see it, just
For now.
for now.
Yeah.
So the harsh way of saying it is, yeah, we are kicking the can down the road, right?
Yeah.
That's a harsher way of saying it.
Right.
But another way of saying it is there's enough elements that we're uncertain about. We're just gonna look at the immediate things that we can do right now.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying too, that we framed out some parameters for each of the work groups, but the work groups should have. They could sort of make their work group into whatever they want,
Right.
right? And so this
Yeah.
group could, could put out short-term ads in the next 5 months, and then middle term for the next 5 years, and long-term,
Right.
they can do what they think. Cause it's really just recommendation.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
When I think about this option, I tend to think that it's the group that sort of asked the question of what happens if we don't do anything specific or really make an investment of some kind, because the other two both have some pretty significant upfront investments, but this is more or less a recognition of if something resembles the status quo or is sort of only marginally different from the status quo occurs, what do we expect is going to happen with this system and how long is that going to take? Are, I think, very reasonable questions to be asking of this solution.
Great. I mean, I think all this is really helpful. The only thing I just want to add, and this really isn't just for this work group, it's for all of them. But any of these work groups can suggest kind of conditions or conditional options, right? You could say, if X happens, then we suggest Y, right? So you're coming up with proposals, and as Rachel said, it's really up to the groups to define what that means, right? But this could, just to your point, Vicky, could say like, our proposal for what should happen is to wait 8 years before we revisit this because of X, Y, Z, and at that point, if A is happening, we recommend doing this other thing, right, or something else.
Right, the if then option.
Exactly, if then, yeah. And again, that's not just for this group.
It's
that's
for
really
all of
any
them,
group. Yeah,
right?
Or stages.
Stages.
exactly,
right.
yeah, stages as well.
Stage 1
Yeah.
is next
Right.
year,
Yeah.
stage 2 and 3.
Right,
Yeah.
so we're looking ahead and trying to grapple with the uncertainties of the
Yeah.
future.
So other questions or comments before we kind of share just the results of the survey on membership and have a conversation on how we want to divide those up?
We had there was a proposal.
Right.
For something, is that something we should start with, or should we start over? There was a proposal.
Yeah,
We got
we're gonna
the-
share that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
and then
Yeah,
we'll
well,
kind of.
So this is not,
Hash it out.
Yeah.
this is not binding,
Okay.
right? This is simply a report back of the poll that we took, a few meetings back, and what people's top choices were, coming from that poll. And then you might recall, we polled on 4 work groups, the 4th being recreation. So for those, we've shown what those people's second choice was. So you can see the outcomes, sort of what the top choices were, and the second choices. And I'll just say nicely, right? The numbers came out pretty even, right? Both in terms of voting and non-voting members, and sort of just if you're thinking about the different perspectives that people are
Yeah.
coming from, they're kind of
Yeah,
seem
nice-
nicely represented.
It's a
We,
nice distribution.
yeah, but I say that this is,
Groups on here. is there?
yeah.
Yeah, the last
So,
one has to be
right,
split
right.
up.
This one has to.
So-
Yeah.
But even looking at that, if you were to put these
Put
folks,
down like
their
their
second
second
choice, that actually.
choices.
Right, these are all, right, these are
Possibly, we'll discuss. it.
right, they're
Yeah.
all first choices, so the people
I
in
see.
recreation, history and character would just could just go to their
Into
second.
this.
Yeah.
And you still, but none of it's binding, if people,
Yeah.
what you've learned now is
Right.
different from what you thought you knew back when we first talked about this, then there's room to
Yes.
redistribute
Yeah.
people.
So why don't we ask, how to start? I mean, dredging, right now we have Jeff, Keith, Delia, and Chris. Are all you folks, Jeff, you're here. I know Keith is not, but I know he wants to do it. Delia,
Quick is not here.
I'm sorry, Jeff Quick is not here. I thought it was Jeff
And that's
Collins.
a question for me, Bill, is he able to participate? Cause I know he doesn't come to all of these, so I just wanna make sure this group isn't.
Yeah, we always have more people.
Good question,
Yeah. So right now we have Keith, Delia, and Chris.
Maybe Paul, if we
And
use.
Paul.
And Paul, that's what I was gonna ask. Paul, how about you? Where do you think?
Yeah, that's fine. I agree.
All right, so Paul, we moved on up. Still, it's like baseball. Yeah, this is good. That's right, in the draft. This is good.
Yeah.
It's a player to be named later is what it is.
You know, we'll talk about your options. Don't worry about it. All right. Dam removal, we have Liz. Yeah, good, Liz. You good with this?
Yeah.
Good. Jeff Collins. Yeah, Jeff, still in?
Absolutely. Talk about performance bonuses later.
Yeah,
Much later.
that's right. Malcolm, you still in for this one? You're muted, Malcolm. Get your agent. Still can't hear you.
Okay, sorry, I'm not muted anymore. Yes, I'm still good for that.
All right, good. Vicky, how about you?
Yes.
All right. Anybody else want?
Ben was.
Oh, Sven, and Bruce, by the way. Bruce, you did what I did. You didn't answer the survey any more than I did, so we're both in trouble, but that's okay. I got to put somewhere. Savannah, you're into dam, wanna do dam removal?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, good. And now for the other group, it's, let's see, Mark, you in for this?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm in. Bert? All right, Bruce, you're the only one left. You in with us?
David, yeah.
David.
And
David with us?
David said no. Is David with us today?
No.
I don't think
Oh,
so.
okay.
Yes, I am.
David,
Yes,
you are in there.
yes, I'm with you. Yes, I am.
Oh, good.
Okay.
David, you had put down as a second, no action. Are you still okay with that?
Yes.
Great, great. So Bruce, how about you? What do you think?
And
Oh, of course, and Ann, that's right.
I put you in, no action.
Yeah,
Then if you go into the, if you go into dredging, it'd be 5 in each group.
that sounds good. Can you talk him into it? What can you offer him?
What do you say? I'm offering the big bucks.
Well, I don't know, let me see what like agent.
That's right, that's right, that's right.
It's actually more like the trades where they all manage.
That's right, that's
You
right.
can take advantage of me because I have no
Yeah.
idea what that's all this
Just,
means.
just to clarify, I think we are at 5 currently in
Yeah.
each group, just to
Right.
clarify.
Good,
Yeah.
good. So we're,
So, so Bruce, that means
That's
you'd be a 6th in any group.
Well,
but,
if Jeff,
yeah,
if Jeff quit.
Assuming Jeff.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
that was
right.
the question.
Right, but yeah, it's true, he's maybe less available. so.
it's okay.
That's less available, move to
Yeah.
5, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Close
Either way.
enough,
Yeah,
Good.
close enough for
You're
government,
easy,
right?
They're good.
It's easy.
all right.
That was an easy trade.
So we got our
We got that, so,
Excellent.
That was easy.
I go where
Onward
they,
and
I go where they
upward.
want me, not.
That's right, that's right.
All
right.
so the next set of issues we really wanted to talk about with you is just having a conversation about what we want these groups to work on. And then I think we also want to talk about the open meeting law issues, but, and we sent around this guidance document that was sort of framed like an FAQ just to address some of the questions that had come up and hopefully provide some clarity. And you know, we can talk about that and, you know, if there are any questions or concerns in that document. We can also, you know, if this feels pretty clear, and good to people, right? We can also just talk about, you know, check in with these different work
Right.
groups and talk about what you actually are interested in exploring and get some feedback from other members of the group on, you know, what they'd like to see you work on. But maybe, you know, I'll turn this back to Bill, we can,
Well, I'm looking at the work group, thank you, looking at the work group guidance document. Anyone have comments they want to make about that, the 2-page thing that we've been circulating? One thing I want to say, which I'll say this, what I really see us doing, is turning over this, most of the time of these meetings in the future to work groups. So that we can get, I mean, it's gonna be hard enough to schedule things in. So I'm hoping that we can get almost all of our work done, or a lot of our work done right here. That makes sense to you. And by the way, that also has an advantage when we talk about open meeting law, because then when you report back, we're adhering to the open meeting law. So that's one thing which I like about this. And I also want to say, I really hope we move towards proposals and not just ideas. I would really like to see us have proposals, concrete proposals, and ultimately with some, you know, some financial estimates for the group, from the groups. Any comments, any thoughts about this? Oh, one more thing. I'm hoping for, I would see this as having feedback. We talked about this with Chris and others.
Right.
In September and October. I don't think there's anything reasonable having it any earlier than that. It's the summertime, we're all gonna be or different places. And I'm actually thinking towards mid-September and early October personally. I think that's when we can expect some of the work groups to report back. Does that seem reasonable to people?
Because at the same point in time, every meeting we come here, we're sharing.
Yes.
Cross-
Are there any
cross-
issues? Do we
Yeah.
have any questions? or-
Feedback.
So we
Yeah.
know what the path and
Right.
We know what the path is gonna be. And also you might find something in your work group where you might say, listen, we want everybody to hear about this. We're not sure how this fits in. And that could be a general presentation for all of us. It seemed good.
Just in terms of what you're thinking about in terms of that, because I know in this, we're sort of saying, once we get ideas, then we'll go think about costs. Still
Sure.
thinking costs after that, like kind of September, October timeframe, or is that kind of too late?
Too late. I think you don't come back to us with ideas, you come back with proposals.
Okay.
Because I mean, again, we get caught on ideas. We all like to talk.
Yeah,
We'll be here
sorry.
forever.
I guess what I'm saying, I guess what I was thinking is that it's sort of how we'll accomplish it is laying out, like, once we decide what the proposal is.
Yeah. Come
then
back first.
Come back and then.
Yeah, because
Get the
we,
costing, so we're
exactly.
still sort of, so then costing will be sort of like an October.
yes,
sort of
because when you come
situation,
back that first time, then the rest of us will once more look at the criteria that we've all developed and the individual stakeholder issues that we've developed and face and critique it then. And you have to, you know, furnish it or change it a bit. Bruce?
So to me, it's just because of the way I'm hearing this, it sounds like what we're doing is we're taking, those ideas are gonna happen in the small groups.
Yes,
And then from those ideas in the smaller groups, we develop the proposal,
correct.
and then we bring the proposal back.
Or
Right.
more than one.
Well,
proposal.
And
Or
more than one, if you have more
The
than one.
But
yeah,
every
but-
meeting,
But
every
as
meeting,
you-
yeah, as you go through the meeting, as each meeting that you come to, you're gonna share something about what you've done, a little
Right.
something so that everyone's aware of
Where
how
the
we're
group is at.
progressing.
Yeah, where the
what's
group is
going
at.
on,
Right,
any
and it's
issues.
also a place to bring problems or dilemmas or, you know, get advice from the.
Right.
We're
larger group
unsure
as
about
well,
which direction to
right.
go, what do you
Right.
think?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, you have a hand up?
Thank you.
Yeah, it might help if the co-chairs put together an outline for proposals, what you would like to see in those, because when I read this, there are So there are design elements and there's attributes and a combination. So getting us all on the same page, if you can kind of outline what the elements of the proposal would look like. Maybe you have it here, but I'm a little confused about what you're looking
That's a
for.
good point, Paul.
Paul,
Yeah,
are you
'cause
looking
we
for
were-
something that's like a template or what?
Yeah,
what-
yeah, a
Maybe
template.
the Criteria, like
I
you'd
think
go
it
by
would
the
be the
criteria
criteria.
and say, how does your proposal answer criteria 1? Criteria 2, criteria 3, and make
Well,
sure all.
but that's not a design. There's a
Right.
design,
All
what
the
is,
answer.
and then there's the evaluation criteria. So there's design and then the evaluation of that design. Those are two different things. And
Let me try one, if I could. I mean, if I were in the dredging group, I would expect that I would see one, it seems to me likely, I may be blunt about this, that you're going to come back and say to us, look, we've looked this over, we think it'd be really good to look at resubmit a proposal for dredging 35, whatever it was, 35,000 cubic yards. And we're proposing that we put this, without having trucks, we sort of use pipes and we put it over on the land next to Route 2.
Mhm.
And therefore, at the same time, we'll build a dock. I don't know if we're gonna get a beach because, health issues, but who knows? But, that's what we're proposing. That's what, that hard proposal is what we're putting out there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then put that in front of us and we'd say, well, have you thought about, whatever it is, and then we'll look at it one more time. We think it's a good thing. You take it back and find out how much it costs.
Mhm.
well,
That's how
I think Vicky's comment helps because we're really looking at the quote unquote design elements, which you just described, and then the evaluation criteria, looking at those design against the criteria. So there are really two parts to what you're asking the groups to do.
Yeah, I think what will happen is when you start to look at the criteria, it'll be like, is that accessible to all socioeconomic groups?
Right.
Do you need to add some other way for
Yeah.
for handicapped people to get into
Good
the
point.
boat launch? Like
Yeah.
it'll help guide you in the creation of your design proposal, because you have more than just one thing to answer. You have all those things to answer in that proposal.
Liz, was there something that you were gonna add? No, okay.
But I did want to ask about the stakeholders, because I think the way this group was created was we each represent a certain stakeholder group. And so what I've learned over time is that we also bring our own personal opinions to this group. But I think at some point, in each of these work groups, our stakeholder group needs to be represented. So if I'm the upstream abutter, I have to give the opinion of the upstream abutter. If I'm Paul in recreation, he's got to give the recreation view of these proposals. Is that right?
I wouldn't see it that way
No?
personally. No, personally, I think when you go into these groups, and we've done this before.
Okay.
You go in, and you're not necessarily in favor of, I'm not even sure, what group you're in.
I'm upstream abutter.
I mean, no, I
She's in
mean,
the dam
your dam
Oh,
removal,
the dam removal, yeah.
dam removal. Obviously, you might be interested in dam removal, but for this proposal, you're gonna put forth the best dam
That's right.
removal, the dam does that sound like a
That's-
dam?
I say that a lot.
You get my idea.
Yeah,
That's what
Siri
you're-
does sees it
I
differently.
know. That's what you're trying to do. You're putting the best one you can
I see.
forward. And then when we come back as a group, I think that's where the stakeholders really have a chance to speak up.
Yeah.
Because they all need to be represented at some
Right.
point,
Oh, yeah, no, definitely
where is that?
represent-
So it's when we come back together.
I think so.
Okay.
I think specifically when we put that in, we were thinking of David's point about Scout
Right,
Island.
it's right.
And
That's
so I think that's where that comes in very
I think it comes-
strongly.
I think it comes in at, towards the end, when you start really looking at criteria, there's no intention here to try to keep people from expressing the feelings that they're carrying for their constituents, right? It's just that you can still work in the work group, for the goal of your work group,
Okay,
knowing that, because remember, this may be a proposal, but it's not a decision, right?
Right, it's a
The work
proposal.
groups are
but at
coming-
some point along the way.
Yeah, that's right.
That
Comes to
does
this-
get-
that's
so
right.
I like that.
Mark has a point.
Which is one way to think about this is assuming that all of these groups successfully come out with interesting and effective proposals, then there's gonna be some kind of ranking at some enforced ranking really of those proposals that this group will be doing on the way to trying to make a board recommendation. And that is, I think, appropriately where, if you're here representing a particular stakeholder group or recognizing what that stakeholder does, we'll have to get around the mechanics of that. But that's when we get to say, okay, from the perspective of the stakeholder that I'm supposed to be representing, which one of these, you know, n number of proposals that we have passed our filter as being reasonable and hopefully feasible ranks highest?
Well, Bruce had comments.
So one more thing, sort of going back to the idea of proposals, and it goes kind of to Paul. I think, Paul, what you're asking for is like a framework for the proposal, because I was thinking about recently, well, last year, being a reader for
Yeah.
proposals. Every proposal was framed the same that came to the table, because you have to look at something that's similar.
Okay.
You can't really truly make
Yeah,
a
good point.
decision without that framework, and the framework is there, which is what we all agreed
The
upon.
criteria.
Right. That criteria. So it's like thinking about that framework of how to answer the questions that fit into the framework with your proposal, because if pieces are missing because you don't have the answers, that's the report back
Right.
time.
That's
That's the consultation time.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I'm working on a grant now, and like I've talked to EPA 3 times already.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
one of the things that comes up is that I've submitted pieces and parcel this, hey, what do you think about this? You're not really answering that. You might want to think about this way, because it doesn't fit into the framework.
Mhm.
Because every proposal that makes it through the first screening has to be the same.
So I'll just say, I think if it'd be helpful, and we don't have to answer this right now, we as a planning team can create a simple
A simple,
template.
That's a good idea.
a simple
You
one,
should.
right?
The other thing I just want to add, before we move on from the point that Vicky made, just a healthy amendment or addition to the responses that are saying, yeah, you should have on kind of your full task force hat, try to make the best dam removal project that you can, or proposal you can. I think in service of that goal, you can help the other members of your group understand the concerns that would make a dam removal project less palatable.
Right.
Help make it better by saying, hey, look, like, this is never gonna fly in the town, or we're gonna face a lot of challenges, right? Let me help you come up with ideas to make it better and more acceptable to the stakeholders that I know really well.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's sort of that critical eye, you bring that
Yeah.
up. And that's the value of having
Yeah.
the groups, balanced this way. And Paul has.
Paul? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I enjoy using the raise hand function. So, question, if we need additional help from EA or outside technical information, I can think of dredging, we need a couple. One related to costs and, for example, should we research those things ourselves or can EA help us? And if we need that help, how do we ask for that help?
If you don't mind me, we talked about that a little bit, in preparing for the meeting, and, we thought you would go through, Delia, who would work out, and who would work out consultation with EA and anybody else you need. Get the
Okay.
funds you need to do that. Is that true, Delia?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easiest just to have, so we have them as a, consultant right now and the point person. And to keep that framework and, anybody's welcome to participate in any conversations with them.
Right.
But, just to sort of, if there are questions, get those to me in an email, we can send it to them. If it's something where people feel like they need to meet with them, consult with them, then they can do that. But all their time comes with a cost, and so we just need to be sure that we're managing that appropriately.
Well, we've already been anticipating, for
Yeah.
example, the Route 2 dredging site is something that would have to be, looked at with someone like EA.
Yeah, I'm just curious, in terms of efficiency of use of those funds would be if we would all do the estimating at one time instead of one group calling one week and saying, I need an estimate on cubic yard costs, and then another group saying, I need a cost on whatever, moving trucks, and I need a cost on this. We could keep EA going like for 6 weeks nonstop if we keep asking, if we throw questions at you versus like pulling together the proposals and then saying, we would now like, based on these proposals, here's some questions, and we would like a cost on 1, 2, and 3.
I think,
And you would like a cost on 3, and I would like a cost on 3, and we give it to EA and say, please answer these questions and cost these
I
out.
think that's more in line of how I was thinking about it, is that, whereas as we come here to the meetings and we share what we've come up with and where we're at, and we need costs, then it's kind of, is there things that
Absolutely.
we can put together and
Absolutely.
whatever and.
Yeah, no, I don't anticipate that every time there's a question about something that we're calling
Right.
EA. So I
Right.
don't think that's gonna be efficient use of
Right.
anyone's time, but I think it is more,
Mhm.
Yeah,
know,
makes sense.
Yeah,
coming to
Makes sense.
the, and then having
You're right,
that,
that's a good
okay,
idea.
the larger group says,
That's a great idea.
this is the,
Yeah, let's hash it out
Point it.
first,
Yeah.
Right,
because there might be some expertise between Jeff
Yep.
and Keith.
Yeah,
and Delia.
definitely.
Like we found expertise in the room on
Yeah, yeah.
things. My group might not have it, but your group might have
Right.
it, and yours, so we could hash it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is a great idea. I think the only thing I might suggest is don't hesitate to ask, you know, the planning team or Julia, if you feel like you're stuck on something and there's a way we can help you out.
right.
Right? There might be ways to, you know, just help with the conversation. We'll still, of course, bring everything back into the main group and before we're investing significant.
Well, it also
resources.
seems like there's a difference between like questions we might have around costs holding us up versus like, you know, like we keep on talking about the 30% stuff that
Mhm.
EA is waiting on. So like those kinds of questions, I assume would be more kind of ad hoc.
Yeah, and
type of
available.
things,
Yeah. the value of the group, I think is gonna
Yeah.
pay off in those situations.
Good. So what's next? What do we have, what haven't we answered yet on this?
Meeting law.
Well.
Open meeting law.
If you just, Julia, I don't know if you want to bring up the issue about the Route 2 EA scope at this point.
oh, so I think I mentioned at the last meeting that we are looking to modify EA scope to be a little bit more aligned with the work of the task force. We got them under contract before the task force was even being considered. They're doing the 30% design removal, 30% dam removal design right now. But we also had items in their scope to address public comment and have, you know, some public engagement. So, you know, one thing, anticipating that, you know, and I don't want to sort of jump the gun on this, so we'll wait to have the task force, I mean, the subgroup decide if this is appropriate. But one thing that we have talked about with EA is having them prepare or modifying their scope so that it includes a new task, instead of having the disposal of the materials, the dredge sediment, be it the restricted area of the prison, which is what the prison had selected as their preferred alternative. They have also said, well, you could put it, you know, west of the parking lot, south of Route 2.
Right.
And we could contract with EA or, you know, modify their contract to have them prepare some, you know, go out and survey the area and then have a new plan developed that we could then bring to a cost estimator. We do have to keep in mind, and this is something the dredging subgroup will have to talk about, that exact spot is one of the areas of future Concord Rotary modifications. But I think there's still value to getting that because it's an unrestricted area. I don't know, this is probably going into too much detail.
Yeah, I would say, believe it or not, I think let that group of which you're part, work that through. And it's nice to know, though, that they're willing to, that
Yeah.
you can work it out financially, that they would look at that land.
Just to check, is there a time sensitive thing that to have that be an opportunity for that group needs to be decided now, or is it just, we want this to be on people's radar?
I don't think there's a need to know that right now. I
Okay.
think we can wait for the subgroups to decide if that's something that they see value in
Mhm.
bringing forward.
Jeff has his hand up. Jeff?
Thank you, Bill. Julie, you mentioned the 30% dam removal design scope for EA. What's the timeline on that? Obviously, that'll be helpful to the dam removal group or even partial work.
Yeah, so we expect that they will have some draft designs by the end of the month. And once those have been, you know, finalized, then we would share them with the full task force.
That's great.
Thank you.
Mark?
I guess sort of a related question is the task that we were just talking about, which I guess adds up to the feasibility of using that agricultural land for the dredge material. Is that something we would need to know before we say, put out a modified bid package that specified using that? Would we have to collect that information?
So
first?
that's a great question, and just to clarify, we would not reissue the bid because we don't that would be intending to put the project out to construction when we've
Yeah.
selected a bidder, right? So instead, what we would do is work with one or two construction cost estimating firms.
Hmm.
Here's the design, what do you think this is going to cost? And do that, you know, do it with the dam removal design.
I thought
No, I
Mark's
think Mark's-
question,
yeah, it's a different
question. I thought Mark's question, is
We-
about,
we-
was whether or not the land is secure from MCI for us to use, is that?
No, my question was more like, is this information that we would need to do before we issued an RFI or an RFP for that? Or is it something that if we issued an RFI or RFP, we would, you know, it would be up to the proposer, the respondent to that, to just know that, like, is it really information that has to be there in order to get a response? Or is this is this testable through the marketplace essentially by saying, hey, there's an available area.
Right.
If you think you can use it, give us a price kind of thing, because I guess I was reading the materials that were distributed around the CPA and the modification of the CPA application, and I think there's many who, you know, like myself, feel like the last quote that we got for a dredging project was flawed in many, many ways, and I'm sure I'm not alone in wishing we had a better sense of what that would cost in today's market with this option. And I'm just wondering whether we need to do that with EA in order to get that someday, or is that something that if we decided that we were putting that forward, we would be able to skip that step?
Like, would that be part of the design
Yeah.
plans that we would put out for RFP? Would that help already been vetted as a solution instead of like last time, allowing them
Right.
the options of what to do with that?
So DOC has said that land is available.
Right.
I mean, I think, and this is something I think the subgroup really should, but I think, it's really to get a cost of placing material on unrestricted lands. And
Yeah.
if that is a reasonable cost, then I think the next thing is to find a, you know, I mean, that may not be, you know, I think the next question is whether or not DOC is willing to give up usable farmland, because that area is not used as farmland.
Right. And I think to answer one other potential question is, my understanding of the area, and I may be wrong about that is actually not land that's considered part of the MCI Concord land that's becoming available.
Right.
So
Correct.
it's
Right.
part of what we would consider the Northeast Correctional Facility, which the state is saying is not there. So to anybody who I'm just saying this out loud because I think a lot of us understand this already, but to anybody who thinks, well, you know, just we wouldn't have to deal with the state if we wait long enough over using this option, that's probably not the case.
Right.
That's still part of the farm.
It's still part of the farm.
So then that
Yeah,
subgroup
that's
would have to vet.
That's a
a
much
little bit
quicker
of
way
that.
of saying. it.
And so as long as we can confirm that land is available. Yeah,
It's good.
right, so we need to confirm, right, that land is available to us, to the dredging group? Can we confirm it?
Well, I mean, the prison has said it's available.
Available. Are they
But
written
when-
something? This is- I don't remember.
DOC was the one who came up with that second alternative when the bid was
Okay.
so high.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
good,
So
Doesn't mean
Yeah.
it will be done, right? It's
yeah,
just-
that's good.
subject, of course, to whatever the Department of Transportation is.
That's right.
But even, let me just put it out, even if the Department of Transportation decides to put it right through that land, you're not dealing with hazardous soil.
That's
Right.
right.
You know, they would just push it aside or something, you know, it doesn't.
It's out there first.
We pushed it there.
Thin it out, get water to go back through the system.
Water it down.
Bring it back up, dredge it back up.
I think the other question too is, we don't really know what they're gonna do, you know, as
No.
far as Route 2, so
We don't know.
kind of if we
You
do
do
wait
this
for that,
first.
Yeah.
They're gonna work with it.
They're-
If
they're-
it's already there, what are they gonna do about it?
It's only, it's, yeah,
I can't wait to see what that work group comes up with.
me neither. Where are we now? So what do we need to do?
Okay.
Yeah, I think at this point, why don't we talk about open meeting law,
Yes.
to get those issues clarified for folks. Unless, was there another question on the?
Anybody else?
No, okay. So, yeah, I mean, we shared a little primer for you, a little briefing on open meeting law, so. We do need to comply with the law, right? And there's some guidance on how that happens, so I think maybe I'll turn it over to Bert, do you wanna just kind of walk folks through this? And I think for everyone, we really wanna make sure that there are no questions, this feels like easy, you know what you can do, you're not worried or anxious about it, so feel free to ask any questions that strike you that you need to feel confident and clear. So, go ahead, Bert.
Yeah, like Toby was saying, we put together this document just to kind of help the subgroups, stay in compliance with open meeting law and just be a little more comfortable with it. So we just run through it real quickly. So the first thing, with agendas, they have to be posted 48 hours in advance. So 2 days, and that's business days. So it excludes weekends, holidays, so just something to keep in mind, as you're setting agendas and scheduling meetings. They do have to be publicly accessible. So with these, it's kind of a unique situation, the subgroups, not like a normal committee or the task force, in terms of where you might be meeting, depending on what the subgroup wants to do. So with public access, that can be just remote, so on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you'd want to use. But the important thing is that the public can hear and view the meeting in real time. So it's not like a recording of the meeting after the fact, it has to be in real time. So if you did want to meet somewhere that's not necessarily a publicly accessible place, it just has to be online. And I would just say, if that's what you're gonna do, probably make sure that there's some good acoustics so people can hear. You'll be able to set up something where people can see, just those little logistical things to keep in mind. A little further on the meeting notice agenda, got a couple bullets there for things to include, pretty straightforward, what you want to include on those agendas, and then, I think the assumption is that the agendas for the subgroups will probably be pretty simple most of the time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're totally vague. So I would say try to be as specific as you can about what's gonna be discussed, but again, it still might be only 1 or 2 agenda items, depending on what you plan to discuss at that, but try to be as specific as you can. And there is at the end, you can see there is a template for a meeting notice and agenda just to use.
So if let's say that a subgroup decides they're gonna meet every Tuesday. From now till mid-September, can we just send it to you or to somebody and say, can you post this and can you set up a Zoom link instead of my personal Zoom link or yours, and then like 7 different Zoom links?
Sure, so do you mean like send it one time and have one?
Yeah.
So it'll have to be a different meeting notice and agenda each time?
Yeah, but if we send it to you beforehand, you'll know, and you'll just every 48 hours beforehand, you could post it.
I think
Because I think this is the messiest part for me. It's like,
sure.
are we gonna have
Yeah,
8
it
different Zoom links and the public's gonna be like,
Yeah,
I didn't know
I
this
see what you're
was Chris's
saying.
personal
It
Zoom
could
link.
be one Zoom link, so that could be, but we won't be able to provide you with that Zoom link. You will have to provide us with your either Zoom or Teams.
So we have to set up our own personal.
Or you can do it
Well,
in a public, like we.
Or you can do it,
without
me
Zoom.
here if the room's available.
So
You still have to have a Zoom.
No, Zoom is only for private, right?
You
If
can do, I mean, the Zoom, you can. Zoom for 40 minutes is free, but that might not be enough.
No,
time.
I'm sorry, I think I was clear. So if you're meeting in a publicly accessible place,
Yeah.
you do not need to have a Zoom link. That's
Correct.
only if you're.
You don't.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You don't need to, it's not a
I
requirement.
would imagine kind of
Public place.
3 different approaches you could do here. 1, find a public place to meet. Don't even need to worry about Zoom.
Yeah.
Number 2,
Well, although, let me just, because we've been pushed back on that, people have asked at our public forum, like, how could you not have included a Zoom link for that public forum? It was very,
right,
not perceived well.
okay, so leave perceptions aside, you're just in terms of legal obligations.
I know, but we're
Yeah.
trying to be a public,
Sure.
accessible
Yeah.
Sure.
discussion,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. The other thing you could do is just have a Zoom with everyone in their offices, just online meeting, right? The other thing you could do, and that would, I think, if someone in your group has Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, anything that you can make publicly accessible, you can just set that up. If you don't, and this is stressful and challenging for you, get in touch with the planning team, we'll help you out. we have a Zoom Pro account, I'll just need to be there and start the meeting for you, and then I can go. Either one of us can do that for you. So don't stress if the Zoom link has you stressed out.
And it's not that
Yeah.
it's stressed out, because we do it all day long, but
Sure.
it's more that the public's gonna get like 8 different Zoom meeting, go to whatever, links while we do this for the next 2 months.
But wouldn't it make sense then, if you think about that, is just make it consistent for each group so that it's like
Yeah.
you have this
Yeah.
group. The,
Yeah.
the whole task force does this, but when, group A meets, this is every time it's this
Yeah.
particular Zoom link.
Yeah.
So that it's the same every time you
Yeah.
put it up.
Yeah.
Zoom has a
we are for
recurring
this.
Yeah.
link function, which you
Yeah,
could
I
use.
think that's what you were,
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah.
what I was
See, I have,
hoping.
I have,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
we have a
Right.
proper team, so. it's-
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Just
it's set it
to
up.
name quickly, the third option, just is you could do this in someone's living room,
Mhm.
have a laptop set up, as long as they can see and hear everything, that can be the Zoom,
Right.
okay? So those are.
But it has to
different
go out, the link to that has to
The
go out.
link
48
still has to go
hours.
out.
Still has to go out.
That's the part,
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Paul, Paul's his hand up. Paul?
You're on.
You have mute.
Mute.
Likes to raise his hand, but.
Yes. My head is a little bit exploding here. So we're basically setting up 3 different committees. And
Right.
each one of those needs an agenda, needs a chair, a clerk.
No.
You do not need to elect officers.
Excuse me?
You do not need to elect officers for the subgroups.
But somebody has to set the agenda and somebody has to take the minutes. And so, yes, formally, we don't need that. But somebody has to lead that effort, right? To set, I'm just practically speaking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Somebody has to lead, call it a chair or not, and then somebody has a clerk for each one. And we do have to have, do have to have Zoom. I mean, there are 4 of us on Zoom right here. So to attend these is probably gonna be practical, and then the public has to be invited. Do we have to record these meetings?
No. But we have
No?
to take meeting minutes and post them. Yes.
There's no requirement to record the meetings, you just need minutes, and Bert
Okay.
will go into that, they can be very brief, I mean, I've seen minutes that are just bullets.
Mhm.
So really, you have to capture the gist of the discussion and any votes that are taken, because you are now as a subgroup. You are now establishing a new quorum, so if it's 5 members, 3 would be a quorum of that subgroup. So you have to record the votes.
And if we look at a drawing, or if we look at the whatever document, we have to record that and we have to post it.
It should be referenced in the document, in the minutes.
This is saying, and if we draw something, we also have to scan it and post it. So there's a lot of, when we have.
You're right,
what's in it?
absolutely.
Good
It's,
point.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, sure is.
I don't know, do you have more? Do you wanna talk
On
about?
minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of like.
Yeah.
So kind of like Delia was saying, they don't have to be really, really detailed summaries. There doesn't have to be a transcript. Just capture what's discussed. There's a couple bullets here under meeting minutes, so that's sort of the bare minimum of what would need to be in there. So if you do that, you'll be all set with minutes. I think probably if someone wanted to do more, that there's no issue with that, but this is more just to let you know, it doesn't need to be a huge lift for people in the subgroups to do the minutes.
Okay, but the minutes have to be reviewed, posted. Somebody has to submit that to the town. I mean, the whole process of minutes is more than just taking minutes, correct?
So we can review them and make changes to them, right? We can edit them.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about, if the subgroups are meeting during our meeting time? Does that mean we don't have to do minutes?
Yes, so if the way that would work, if the subgroups came back and reported in a sentence or 2 to the larger group. That gets captured in the minutes and that would comply with open meeting law.
So that's a real incentive to make sure most of our meetings take place in this,
No, but
use
that's
this.
2 different things, I think.
Yes.
You're saying,
Oh,
if the subgroups sit here and this is one group and that's one
Yeah.
group and that's one group and that's one group.
Yeah.
But the public can't hear any of those
Yeah,
groups.
that's not
That wouldn't work.
So this was
That's not
cleared with the town clerk's office.
really to like break up into subgroups that the public can't follow. I
But
mean,
then,
mm,
Mm.
That's
I
like
see.
going into executive session.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Which,
it's a little weird, cause even
mean,
this group here, who's
it's-
in
it's one
person, they
thing if
can't hear everything.
It's one thing if you're running a public forum where people could, potentially pull up a chair
Yeah.
and you kind of accommodated that, but I think that having that level of crosstalk, particularly if it's virtual, is pretty.
Yeah.
hard to do.
We didn't specifically talk about that, and I
Yeah.
could re-ask that
Yeah,
question
yeah.
specific to the,
It doesn't feel right to me, but.
yeah, I see what you mean.
Feels right to me, I just. It's just.
Yeah.
If we have our, like, say we meet like the Thursday before our Tuesday meeting, at that Tuesday meeting, we just say, hey, this is what we talked about. That covers off the minutes
No,
requirement.
so what I had.
Okay, I missed it.
Well, that-
What I.
So many
was talking about,
different-
Right, was in the scenario of breaking from this group into now subgroups.
Okay.
What we were talking about was to comply with open meeting law to come back,
Gotcha.
but I think that's a valid point that people online are not gonna follow the
Yeah, and
conversation.
the
Yeah.
typical way that that is done, and, I would agree with this, is if the idea is break off into three groups and then come back and read out what those three groups just did to the main meeting, that's a little bit different because that's contributing back to the main meeting, what that result was, which is the equivalent of a report. I think the problem is if it's like, go make 3 plans
Right.
and then come back and
Yeah,
don't
it's gonna
tell
take a
anybody
spread.
about them until the next time you work on that plan.
Oh, no,
That's-
no, I mean, it
that's-
was intended that you would
Yeah,
break into your subgroups. And then before the end of this meeting,
yeah,
you would come and say what you had worked on.
right, that
But
makes
now
more
I'm
sense.
concerned about,
Yeah.
the public following online.
Following.
I also
Well,
think.
we're not even, I mean, but
Similar to the public workshop.
Yeah,
Where,
but that,
No, because they're not sitting at the table with us.
and we got some criticism in the public workshop,
Right.
obviously
Yeah.
because Zoom wasn't
that's
available.
what I'm.
And that was
Right.
why. Zoom
And
is
that
not
was
Yeah,
available.
but that
Yeah.
was why, because it's, and we've also done, and certainly we did this with MBTA zonings, we had public workshops where everybody went off into subgroups because they used the Zoom,
Breakout.
breakout
Yeah,
sessions
that's right.
functions, which is also fine, because that was actually facilitated and wasn't a committee meeting, it was a public
Right.
forum that was designed to get input from the public.
That's
So it's a
different.
little bit different,
I think we're gonna have to do this and
I-
try.
yeah, I think-
Report back and do the meeting.
Figure it out as.
I think it's.
right, so the keeping notes.
Yeah.
I do agree with Vicky that if you create something like a chart or diagram or something like that, that should at least appear in the minutes of the thing.
But not necessarily like access to everybody to see,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Uh,
Like for the-
Can you put it on
No,
the?
no, like during the.
No,
meeting.
not during, no.
But after.
After as
Yeah.
part of the minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, as part of the.
We
minutes.
could just take a photo of it and.
Right.
right, you mentioned it in the meeting, but you don't post it till later, similar to what we do now
Right,
with the minutes, the meetings and the recordings.
right.
And those
Slides.
probably make best sense to
Right,
be
when we
still
have-
housed within the same website,
Right,
because it's just now a folder, subcategory.
right.
It's similar to when we have flip charted a conversation during meeting.
Yeah.
That shows up,
We take photos and.
right,
Yeah.
right, later. We take photos and it goes up later.
I want to just make a couple points, and then I have a question to all. So I think just to be really clear, like, you've seen the minutes that we write for these meetings. That is not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay? Like, this is just name the top line items that you spoke about, right? We're gonna come back and share the meaty stuff and have those conversations all in this big group anyway, right?
Right.
So you need to comply with the law. You need to talk about the topics that were talked about, but that should not be a like hour-long ordeal, right?
I'm way
Yeah.
less nervous about the meeting minutes than I am about getting the Zoom link
Yeah.
for all of these meetings posted 48 hours in advance on the
Right.
Concord
Yeah.
Right.
website. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna, let's just say it's my turn to set up the
Yeah.
Teams meeting. I'm gonna have to get that link. I'm gonna have to get the agenda. I'm gonna have to give it to somebody in Concord. They're gonna have to post it within 48 hours. And it's gonna be a
Yeah.
different link than the one that was posted 2 days ago.
So
I
that
signed
makes
off
me,
on that.
goes to my second question is, I think we want to make this as easy for you as
Right,
possible.
right.
So if there are simple things that we as a planning team can take on that feels doable, and I want to check with all my colleagues here, like, we want to do that for you. So if it's gonna make your life a lot easier to be
Could
able
you
to
guys
send an
set up
email, like,
3
we've
Zoom
scheduled
links?
these and you want us to get the email out to make, and
Yeah.
here's the agenda, can you send these at the right time? You
Right,
know, that seems very easy for us.
and if you could set up
Yeah.
3 Zoom links, one for each group, and it's the same Zoom link
I
forever.
don't know
Yeah.
if it can be.
The
same.
only issue with that
No,
is.
it has to be 3 separate Zoom links.
Yeah, 3.
We,
Here,
Yeah.
here we are.
She means like
Yeah.
asking for dam removal, is there one
Yeah.
Zoom
So
link
like-
always?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
or does it
I
have to
mean-
change for every meeting?
No, you just set it up as a recurring
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay,
You set it
that's-
up-
that's
you
easier.
set it up
Yeah.
recurring, and as
Yeah.
long as you copy that link into each of the agendas,
Right.
the thing that has to be at least different enough that it has a different date on it. Has gotta be the agenda, which
Right.
must be posted at least 48 hours in
Right.
advance. There's nothing to stop you from posting an agenda for 3 weeks from now, or
Right.
6
Yeah.
weeks from now.
Right.
And then revising that agenda
That's
later,
what I'm
it
thinking,
just
we
needs
send
to relatively, it needs to accurately reflect what you're planning to do, so. You know, there's an incentive to, you know,
Plan it
make
out.
sure, at least look at it 48 hours
Yeah.
ahead of time and make sure that it reflects what the meeting's gonna be about.
So that's what I was asking earlier, is can we set the dates? Let's just say we're gonna be every Tuesday, and we send it to you and say, dam removal is gonna meet every Tuesday at 5:30. And
Here's
this
my
is-
agenda.
here are the agendas we think we're gonna do,
Right.
but at the end of every meeting, we'll change it for the next one if we need to, and we'll let you know. And
Yeah.
you'll repost it, but that way it's like
yeah,
Right.
clean and it's in your hands. It's always the same link. We always have the same link. We don't have to tell each other, no, use the other link. I've
Yeah.
been there, done that.
so I mean, if that's what would be helpful to the groups, I think we're totally happy to do that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's
And
really
Yeah.
good.
about what is actually the fastest
Yeah.
and smoothest.
And
Yeah.
and well, let me ask you this, and is that, and how about publishing it on the town website? Who does, could you help us with that as well?
Publishing what?
The meetings.
Yeah,
The town clerk's office takes care of that.
Yeah.
but you'll
so-
help us.
So
Yeah,
this
you might
email
send to us
address
and have us
that's
send it, that's
listed
fine.
in the document that Bert covered, meetings at concordma.gov, that goes directly to the town clerk's office. And they will take an attached file, either a Word document or you're usually better with a PDF. And post it for you.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you need that, that's the way to go.
And I'll just say, we're very happy to help you with that. If you
Okay.
would like the planning team.
Mhm.
One thing just to name, logistically on the recurring Zoom meeting link.
Mhm.
If someone has a Zoom Pro account, right, anyone in your team, they can set that up, okay, and you can use the same link for every meeting. If you don't have that, right, that's the best thing. If you don't have that, or if you need help doing it, we can help you, right? But if you don't have a Zoom Pro account in your team, come talk to us. We can get something set up for you, but it's better if it's yours, because if we set it up, we need to have someone open the meeting for
Yeah.
you. So it's an additional logistical challenge.
Right.
But again, we want to help you, so if you need
Yeah.
it, we're here.
The other challenge that comes up with that, of course, is document sharing and things, since a lot of people's accounts are locked down and you can't share a screen or something, and if you want to do that to collaborate with each other, it's really better if somebody can actually be the host of the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, so just to be clear, we can make you the host once we
Yeah.
join, and we would do that and then leave, so that can happen. if
And give
you-
everybody
yeah.
access for sure, yeah.
But it just does mean that, you know, if it's outside of your group,
Yeah.
then somebody, you know, on the planning team or CI, whoever it is going to have to be present to open your meeting and make you a host.
Right, right.
And that's.
Yeah.
That.
That can be a challenge.
But you don't have to
That
go
would be a
on
challenge.
Teams.
Malcolm has a hand up also. No, go ahead, Liz.
I just had a
Yeah.
question,
Hang on, Malcolm, hang on just one second.
email, in terms of like when we were planning our first meeting and getting together, because I know we can't email.
Yes.
Right.
Good
So how
Scheduling
do
is
we
the
handle-
only thing
So
that's
you-
outside of OM.
And like setting an agenda, is that like our first agenda, like how can we set that up or?
That is a good question. I think.
Sorry.
Maybe you just
I'm
do it
just-
tonight.
Go over-
I think
You can
You
set it.
can
okay.
make
Just gonna check.
requests for agenda items, it's deliberation
Okay.
that the open meeting laws designed, but saying.
Like
I
logistical
think
stuff.
we, I would like to discuss the, X aspect of our project.
Right.
Of our proposal at the next meeting is a perfectly okay message to send.
It's, then if it evolves, then it's. a
Right,
problem.
The serial communication,
even
somebody
I-
responds to that, then.
Even if you have some supporting material that goes along with that, and, you know, and here's a report that was published by somebody else that provides background that we'd like to cover at that meeting, you can
Okay.
do all of that kind of thing.
But isn't the first meeting we're gonna kick
You
off,
can
yeah,
do that.
And then that's why that report should be added to the minutes,
Okay.
Right,
because then it becomes part of the
Right,
public record.
right. I was wondering, you had to have it visible for people to, for the public to see, but you don't, right?
No, you don't. I
can't.
mean, it's maybe
It's gone.
helpful, but it's not required.
Okay.
Yeah.
Malcolm, are you with us and do you want to raise your question?
Yeah, well, it's not a question. I was just going to say to the DAM group, I don't know who else has one, but I do have a Zoom Pro account, so I could
really?
do all of that.
Oh, nice. That's good.
One down.
Yeah, you're okay now.
Well, I can do it for the, I can do it for the dredging group.
All right, that's
Yeah.
good now.
No problem.
Come on, Mark.
I'll take care of it.
I do have.
I knew you did. I knew there's no problem. Sorry.
Good.
All right, I'll take care of it.
That's right.
So
Just have to post them though.
Yeah, yeah.
I think let's move to the next agenda item if that's okay.
Yes, that's good.
I think, hopefully you feel confident, any additional questions on open meeting law, feel free to reach out to us. So we want to talk a little bit about some next steps because we actually want some input from you on this. So we designated a little more time for this conversation today. So I'm going to share my screen and some of these are pretty straightforward. And then I think the biggest thing we want to talk a little bit about is kind of what you want in these upcoming meetings. We can talk about the August meeting, but also beyond. So just to name, the next meeting is August 13th, 5 to 7:30 at Harvey Wheeler. We're gonna aim for these 2.5-hour meetings. And keep them to 2.5 hours. I believe it's gonna be in the clock tower room now, Delia, so we're
We're gonna
gonna.
try that room just
Right.
because of the acoustics of the
Acoustics, yeah.
auditorium, and see if
Okay.
that's
A little bit small.
it's a
And-
little smaller.
And isn't the notion is if we like it, we're gonna stay there as opposed to moving around? Is that?
Correct, yes.
We
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
so-
stay in West
We
Concord.
can
Yeah.
see what the group feels
Yeah,
after.
yeah.
Is that starting
Right.
the next meeting? I'm sorry.
Next
Yeah.
meeting,
Yeah.
yeah.
That room is functionally smaller than this one.
Isn't this one?
Yeah, I would just say from doing meetings in both. It may be physically bigger, but with all the stuff that's in there, it
Yeah.
works out to be small.
Oh, then why don't we wait and see then, yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
So we won't commit to anything at this point. And we can also try again at Harvey Wheeler with a different configuration and see if the acoustics get better, so. We'll keep working on it for now. We're gonna try the clock tower, see how that works. We sent an email out with some proposed fall dates, fall winter dates, and we wanted to get your feedback on that. So we have August 13th and then, you know, all the way until September 10th, and I'm thinking is, you know, it's summer months and we want these work groups to really have a chance to get together, so we're gonna slow the cadence down a little bit from now until September. But then at that point, you know, it's roughly every 2 weeks, every 2 to 3, right? But we're getting on a pretty regular cadence. And, you know, a little bit of a longer gap there at some points, but, you know, 2 to 3 weeks. And I think we just wanted to check that that feels okay to people about right. And obviously, you know, we can always revisit that if it feels like things aren't working, but that was our proposal and we wanted to check if that feels acceptable to people.
will you send those around as meeting?
Yeah, we will send those around. They're all sent in the pre-meeting email. So I'm not seeing any hands on that, so unless there are objections, I think we'll go and schedule those, okay? The other couple other items, we just wanted to raise awareness of a couple of other town events that are happening or meetings that are happening on July 22nd. So there's the select board update on Giroux Park that we think could have some relevant discussion, considering the importance of that issue for our deliberations. And likewise, there's an MCI advisory board meeting on July 22nd as well.
And let's ask, if
Yeah,
Mark, you have anything
exactly.
you want to add
Yeah.
about that MCI? meeting?
So there's actually a scheduled sort of legislative tour for MCI tomorrow. The group of invitees are going to get to go inside. So that meeting on Monday, which is at noon, and is online, if anybody wants to attend there, will contain some feedback from the impressions that people will have gathered from that meeting. And then the primary other topic on that meeting, it may or may not be of interest, is going to be a memo from town council about the options for rezoning and, you know, what might be considerations around zoning of that parcel. And actually the two other parcels, the one on opposite side of Commonwealth Avenue from MCI, which of course is directly adjacent to Giroux and the pond, and also the Barrett's Mill, I'm sorry, Monroe. Cummings House, thank you. That parcel, just for a matter of information about that, not that that's really included in there. So that may or may not be very useful. I was saying to Bill earlier that the DCAM, which is the state agency, which is responsible for just ultimately disposing of MCI on behalf of the state, is going to be required by the legislation that passes whenever the state budget passes within 45 days to have a public outreach meeting of some kind. And that would be the first of several such events, which should be an opportunity for them to bring to us, you know, whatever facts they have that are available and might be useful. And, you know, I think it's a good potential coordination point for this group to also be planning to inform, you know, people of that. And I do know that there's some openness to potentially having, you know, us as the Warner's Pond Task Force participate in that in a way of, you know, if you came here to hear about MCI, here's what you might want to know about Warner's Pond and vice versa.
That's very
Good.
And are those meetings recorded, Mark?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
And there are several up. So that task force is still sort of standing itself up, and the rest of the discussion is going to be what we're doing, which is how do you organize yourself? That's that. And then my understanding is that Giroux Park is reaching substantial completion. And so we're going to be hearing from the town manager and her staff about the status of that. And some folks may be aware that there are some folks that have been, you know, asking a lot of questions about that project. And so it would be useful to hear.
Okay. I don't know, if Paul, would you want to add anything about the Giroux Park update, extend your awareness?
No, I'm gonna go, I think it's gonna be the completion of where we are at the present. And yeah, I don't have anything to add. It's not my briefing.
Okay. Great, so let's keep pressing forward. And I don't actually, Chris, I think you were gonna be going to at least one of those, is that right?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go Monday night I was gonna go to the select board meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And obviously sounds like we can watch them on video if needed. So just to follow up on some loose ends from previous meetings, there was some requests around the website accessibility. I think this might have been clarified at the list meeting, but since it was in the minutes, just wanted to name that now our task force website appears on the boards and committees webpage, so it should hopefully be more easily accessible. We've also adjusted some of the language about how to submit comments, so people are clear if they're running out of space in the comment form, they can submit it as two, right, and we'll still receive everything. So just showing kind of how we've tried to address some of the issues that came up there. We'll again be sending out a meeting feedback form after this meeting, so stay tuned for that. We wanted to check in with you about this suggestion that maybe we develop a agreed facts worksheet or something. I think that's something the planning team is happy to take on, I think, right? We are, yeah.
Yeah, I was.
And the goal of this would just be, you know, clarify in simple terms as possible. Are there key issues that we feel like the group has kind of resolved and agreed on? This is a fact. We can agree on this. And I think our stances will try to make that in a way that we hope will be accessible to you all. We'll work on it as a group, right? And get input from everyone and approval, obviously, from our co-chairs to put anything in front of you. But just want to check if that seems like it would be helpful. That came up at the last meeting and has been suggested. by a couple
Okay.
folks. So,
Seeing hands.
Yeah.
Does anyone not think it would be helpful? Just,
Malcolm
oh,
was-
Malcolm's got
Malcolm
his
has-
hand up.
yeah.
Malcolm.
Oh. Sorry, yeah, I think it would be helpful. I was just going to say, what would we call it? Agreed facts sheet doesn't really sound.
Doesn't roll up the tongue. Yeah.
I would think something like frequently asked questions or something that might, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it might be nice to organize it by our criteria categories, so,
We
you
could
know.
try to do
Yeah.
that. We'll see.
Yeah.
We can have,
Yeah.
you know, so we're not skipping around.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also, it's worth noting, I mean, the way that I think about it is that agreed facts don't necessarily mean agreement on the fact. I mean, it's that the fact is a fact, but it doesn't imply that
We agree what it means.
that you agree with what it means. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
like I think there's a delineation there because people may worry about being boxed in.
I don't understand the difference.
I know.
I don't
what you're
either. I
talking
think it should
about.
be just agreed facts.
Just
It's agreed facts or
Like,
agreed facts?
Warner's Pond is 54 acres, or
Okay.
whatever
Yeah,
it's gonna
yeah.
be, right?
Okay.
It's in West Concord, whatever.
Good enough.
Yeah.
I'm overthinking.
Or like, it's 12 feet deep at its deepest and it's
Yeah.
this deep, like there are questions that have been computerized over
That's right.
time
Yeah.
and we should
That's
make
right.
them facts.
And we have
Mark has a
collected
comment.
them.
I
We have
think
collected those.
Top of mind for me, and I know it's come up at multiple meetings, is sort of the status and information around drawdown.
Mhm.
What the capabilities are, and I don't know if that's in the works for coming up, but it was very helpful, I think, to hear from EA about, you know, their assessment on that, and, I resisted trying to dig back into the 2005 engineering studies of the old dam to try to figure out that for myself. I would really love it if somebody could come up with a one pager that says what is the fact.
How does it
around-
work?
Around,
Mhm.
Would it be helpful if, and maybe a one pager is a better approach, but I could ask, we have a stormwater engineer who's starting on Monday. And, she could take a look at the plans
Yeah.
and understand the mechanics. Then would the committee want her to come and present on the mechanics of drawdown?
I have one comment to make, because it came up earlier in a memo, an email from Keith, and he reminded us that, and we had forgotten about it a bit, that he had suggested at one point, I think it was to Chris and myself, that he had suggested that we have someone come in and talk about, from Department of, I'm not sure, DCR or some organization, part of the state, on pond management. And wouldn't that be one of the elements of pond management, would be to look at a drawdown? He also suggested, in that email, that you might bring in someone like, because I know the town.
Harvard.
Yeah, Harvard, town of Harvard they do a drawdown every year on Bear Hill Pond, which is partly a natural pond, but it's also a dammed pond, and they draw it down every year from, I'm not sure if it's 3 or 5, I don't know, you might
It's
know
up to
better.
8 feet.
Is it 8 feet drawdown?
It's in a totally different system.
Yeah, but I know they do that every year, and I know, I mean, so at least I'm not sure that's the best group, who to do it, but that's what the suggestion was.
yeah, and maybe by saying drawdown, I probably actually misstated what the fact is that I'm looking for. Is what the capabilities of the dam that we have built.
Oh, I
are
see.
With respect to letting water out.
That's what I asked last
And,
time.
you know,
That was a question
which
that
is,
Liz
which is a different fact set,
Yeah.
because
Right.
there's a
Right.
design, it's capable of doing certain things from an engineering perspective. And what the results of that
Right,
are in
that's true.
terms of the ecosystem and
Yeah.
stuff that's a different question. This is just, you know, I think when Christine and I walked through there, when we took the tour, we observed a pipe
Right.
that was kind of underneath that.
Yeah.
You know, and we both said, we don't know what that.
So
pipe
that's the
does, but
low
it
level
looks
outlet
pretty-
control
Looks
structure.
pretty big, but yeah, and so maybe, and so to your suggestion, Delia, I think it's a good one.
Hmm.
You know, if we have an engineer on town staff who's capable of actually familiarizing us with the dam that we have.
Mhm.
From that perspective, I think that could be useful for everybody, because
Mhm.
whether you're talking about dredging and keeping it, whether you're talking about maintaining it as it is or removing it, it makes sense to really understand this is our dam and.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting question too, Delia, because you know that the the dam report that we get. It's every 5 years, I think it is, maybe she can look at that as well and,
Yeah.
and kind of help us understand that as part of her presentation.
She's
along with
starting
how
on
the dam
Monday.
works.
Oh, by Tuesday, we want it by Tuesday.
Yeah, I can certainly ask.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she would have to review that
Right.
report to understand
Of course, yeah.
the full picture of the mechanics.
Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, I don't know if that would be part of what she
could present on, yeah.
Yeah.
And how long of, like, how much time? Like, is this like a 10-minute presentation with some Q and A, do you think?
Like what EA did today, I think
Yeah.
that's 20 minutes, what they did today.
Yeah.
Something like
I think
Okay.
they were actually answering a more complicated question.
Yeah,
Probably
I think that's right. I could see if she would be prepared to do it for the August 13th meeting, if that
Great.
sounds.
That sounds
Yeah,
good
sounds
to
good.
people.
Welcome to
pushing her too much.
You know,
She says,
I'll see what, yeah, I'll see what she says.
It's not like holding up anyone's work,
No.
probably.
Yeah.
Probably not,
So-
but I
But it
just,
does keep coming up.
Yeah.
it does
It does
keep
keep coming up.
Yeah, let's find out.
So I'm thinking, for next month, we'll check in on this and if she's available, we'll have her in and we can do a little bit on the mechanics of the dam. We also, as we've been discussing, we'll wanna have a chance for work groups just to check in and get some feedback and talk about what you've been doing and if you have questions for the group and guidance that you'd like. We wanna really spend a good amount of time on that, and make that be sort of the norm for these next set of meetings. So I'll just say, we've heard a number, so that's, I think, good for August. It might be all we need to do in that meeting. There's some other ideas that have come up, around sort of a future agenda setting. And, I think we have a few minutes now. We'd just be interested to hear what people think about some of these ideas that have also come up. So one that we've talked about is, at some point when there's things shared, right, having representatives who can talk about, what can we say about the future of MCI? Right, and, how can we think about that as a task? What should we be thinking about as a task force? Likewise with Jerome, right, the phases of that project, where it stands, what's the potential? We've talked about the mechanics of the dam. We've also, had a number of folks bring in planning documents, right? We talked about the West Concord master plan, another one that might be relevant, that's been brought up to us is the open space and recreation plan. So one idea that we floated is, we could have if there's an interested task force member, kind of do a little report out on some of the relevant pieces they see in those planning documents, and we can discuss it as a group. Bill, you brought up the reminder around pond management that Keith brought to us, right? That could be helpful, right? So DCR could potentially come speak to us. We could have representative from Harvard or another community that does drawdown. We've heard interest in fisheries experts. We've heard suggestion around maybe we could have people who've actually experienced dam removal or dredging, ordinary folk who've been nearby and seen what it's like. Talk about their experience from other communities. So I think, just curious, what if people, are you most excited or interested in any of these?
Right.
Yeah.
I have a question about the pond management stuff, and
I'm sorry.
about the idea of pond management, and this sort of, I had this thought, reading some of the comments, is I want to be careful to get the correct terminology, is someone who does pond management useful when we do not have a pond, we have an impoundment, like they are different. Like we have a river with an impoundment, not a pond, so I'd imagine that the management of it is going to be different. I don't know enough about wetlands and water systems, I don't wanna bring someone in if it's not really gonna be super applicable to us, because it's a very different system.
Right.
Right.
Important.
It sounds like
Yeah.
in itself, what you've said sounds like a good question.
Yeah.
Right away. The thing I would add to all this is that when you think about the kinds of experts or the kind of information that you want brought into that, think about how it relates to the work of your work group, right? As opposed to, this is an interesting thing, but I'm not sure it has any bearing on how I would look at, proposing dredging, right?
And I would add to that, so most impounded systems are the ones that have problems. So pond managers are going to have experience with that.
Right, okay,
Yeah,
that's, yeah.
yeah. And I think the question to ask is, like with do you want to have a pond manager who has experience with herbicide use, so is that somebody from a Solitude or
Right.
wetlands and wildlife? Or
Mhm.
do you want somebody that Harvard rep who has experience with the drawdown procedures at a pond? And I will note that that system is, I mean, it is apples and oranges to Warner's Pond. It's, if people are interested, I can go into that more, but it's just, that's my.
But
The
dude,
way that Delia is framing it
But-
is
let me say one thing.
pond management to what end, right? Like.
Yeah, but I want to say
herbicide.
something about that. I'm not sure I would want someone to just talk about herbicide use. I would want someone like another town committee who must oversee ponds, say, here's the various things we've tried. This has worked, this hasn't worked.
Yeah.
This was a disaster, whatever they would have to say, That's the kind of
What was
thing.
interesting, so somebody had sent around, the information from Plymouth,
Jenny Pond.
Jenny Pond,
Jenny Pond.
you sent that
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
So what was interesting about that was they've done all kinds of different things. They've done dam removal, they've done dredging, they've done,
Right.
bypass channels.
Right.
So that might be interesting to have somebody, and then the other thing that might be interesting is Milford had their pond dredged 10 or so years ago. Might be interesting to hear what they think of it now.
That's a,
Mhm.
that's a good amount of time to
Mhm.
pass.
Mhm. So,
Bruce has.
I'm raising my hand because Ann has tried to put me.
Oh, sorry.
And we keep missing it.
Just sort of on this topic, that's why I shared the article about, damned at both ends and cursed in the middle
Oh, yeah,
by Brian
right.
Donahue, because that talks about sort of, past management of streams. And I think that that's also pretty interesting and how, dams had purposes and sort of, it's sort of, what was the purpose of this dam? What was the purpose of the replacement dam in 2005? What did they say? And,
Yeah,
in the town annual reports,
Yeah.
and, right, was it meant, in the past, dams were used, right, that they had,
yes.
right, and is this dam really just static, or how is it being used and how has it been used over time?
Good
Yeah.
point, I like
Good
that.
point. And the plan moving forward, what was it?
Yeah.
What was it, what they was redone, so what did they do to it to look ahead?
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah, that's what we'd like to know.
So I'm thinking maybe, we can send these ideas. Did you actually want to take off?
Thank you, Ann.
Maybe what makes sense is we can send these ideas out
Yeah,
in our
yeah.
poll and y'all
Yeah,
can
see.
share your thoughts.
Right.
And that'll really be helpful for us as a planning team in terms of
Right.
thinking about what you guys are most interested will be most
Right.
helpful for you.
Right, and it's maybe what order too, it's like
Yeah.
something rises to the top, but this is super high priority for my work group, because I don't see how we can move without it.
Yeah, and if you have ideas that you don't see on this list that you wanna, us to put on the poll, let us know within 24 hours.
Right.
Okay, we'll get it on
Yeah.
there.
Short
Yeah.
timeframe, yeah.
Okay, so we wanna move, I think, to, close to the end of our agenda. There's another item here, task force member topics of interest, and I'm gonna hand it to
Right.
Rachel on this.
So this is, this came out of the last meeting, I believe, with a discussion, or maybe a previous meeting about getting comments on the website and getting comments at our meetings and how to gather them in. And the group does not want to respond to them individually because that would not be fair. But there are topics, so the way that we thought about this, which is subject to your input, is the idea that you are all hearing from the world. You're either, from public comments at these meetings, comments on the website, people you run into at the grocery store, your neighbors, your friends, whoever. And that if there are topics that come up to your attention that are interesting to you, we wanted to set aside a little bit of time within each meeting for members to just bring up things that are of interest to you without having to name who told you, where it came from. That's not the point. The point is that if it caught your attention and you feel that it's something that you want to bring to the group for a discussion, then this is the opportunity to do it. So we thought that we would set aside 10 minutes or so to do that. And I know that Bill and Chris maybe already have something that you wanted to
Just to be clear, Rachel, it
Oh.
could be a written comment.
It could be written, oh,
But
I'm
not
it's
all,
not.
it could be
No,
other
it
things
could
too.
be,
Yeah.
right, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, is it could have come through a written comment,
Yeah.
it could have come through a verbal comment, it could have come from someone at the grocery store, it could have been something that you read. It's just a way for us to gather those thoughts that people have from the outside world and bring them here. It's not a requirement that you sift through every, you know, bit of information that you run into, but this is a way for the group to deliberate or just think about ideas that you have, that you've heard, or that things that you think are interesting to the group. Does
Right.
that cover it? Okay.
And I would just say, even broadening the scope a little bit, if like there's questions around group management, right? Or, you know, factual accuracy of
Right.
issues, that can also, this can also be a time to talk about that.
Right.
If there's any
Right.
issue of interest.
Right, yeah, anything of interest in it, yes, and it definitely covers the group, like how is the group doing? Are we, you know, are there things that are happening that you want from us or that you feel are not helpful? And like, it should cover the gamut. It's really just a place for some open discussion. So with that being said, I think.
Well, I only have one, we were talking about one, but we don't think we want to bother.
Yeah, I thought that was resolved,
I
where,
don't know. I'm not sure. what
so
you-
there was some discussion about dam removal and when it first came to
Ah.
be and when it was initially brought up and
I think it was, I think,
Was it the historical accuracy question?
no, this one, I thought this was, no,
Dam removal history?
yeah, I thought that we had.
So- I probably remember better than I do.
I think Keith was gonna bring that up at the next meeting.
maybe that was
So,
it.
yeah, I think the issue is essentially, a concern that was raised by Keith. I think we can do this on Keith's behalf at this meeting and just move forward. That the meeting minutes, for the last meeting had a statement that seemed to suggest that dam removal wasn't happening before 2009. And I think Keith just wanted to clarify for the record and make sure that, you know, we all have clarity, or that historically dam removal was happening well before 2009. And, you know, that was not the first moment, right, of dam removal. There, you know, I think the point or the issue kind of in our meeting was around when did this kind of get on the town's radar, right? But important not to mix those up, right? This was something that was happening, was known, right? You know,
If I
Lots
remember
of
correctly, the
history,
question
yeah.
was, we rebuilt the dam.
yeah,
And why did we rebuild the dam? And somebody said, well, nobody was taking dams down in
Yeah.
those days, so we rebuilt it.
Right.
And that answer,
Right.
and now I think he's trying to clarify,
Right.
Yeah.
actually, that was an option in those
Yeah.
days. People did take dams down, we
Yeah.
chose to rebuild it. So I
Yeah.
think that was his clarification,
Yeah.
just to make sure.
yeah.
And you had
Yeah,
brought
that's
up
clear.
finding Thoreau quotes, and there's one quote about Thoreau taking a crowbar to a dam.
Yes,
Concord,
yes,
so,
yes, early
yeah, back
on,
in the
very
day.
early. Yes, yes, yes.
So I had one, and I had an exchange with Keith about, this is totally different. I had an exchange with Keith about this because I both liked something that he was presenting, and I was also at first like disappointed about what he had done. But then he wrote back to me. I know he's in Germany. He wrote back to me right away, late night in Germany. He just got back to me as the meeting was starting. So, so originally I was both happy and surprised, but also disappointed when I saw the report on the fish ladder, the passages. That was what would you say, that the Friends of Waters Pond had solicited to have it looked at without letting the committee know. Not that they had to. In other words, Waters Pond, Friends of Waters Pond, at some point, and this is my original take. They had asked an expert from Department of
Marine fisheries.
Marine Fisheries to come in and do a review about whether the dam or it's feasible to have a fish ladder there. Now it's perfectly within their right to do it. That's even within my point, it's within their right even to not even be considered about dam removal, well, that's best for a fishery passage. They clearly and rightly have an advocacy for dam removal, so I have no problem with that. My problem was,
Judging,
no, my problem was,
advocacy for judging.
no, my problem was, I don't get, no, are they?
Yes, you said advocacy for.
Oh, did I say that? Oh, there's an interesting story. Not as bad as Joe Biden. Not as bad as his Uncle Joe. Anyway, so what they did, so my problem was that this was being looked at in May and that it was not brought to the committee, to the task force for us to at least to react to it and to hear about it, and maybe even send someone over to listen to it. So I expressed, I mean, Keith and I have a relationship that goes back to when he was a teenager, so I can act like, you know, so I wrote to him and his response was good. He said, look, I got ahead of him. He, you know, if he had basically, I'm paraphrasing, if he had to do it over again, he certainly would have had asked for an inclusion, had someone there. It happened on a weekend very quickly. Basically, he was saying he wouldn't see it happen again. So that was the bottom line. And that's the important point, I think, is that we keep him, because I said to him, my problem was it can erode trust and openness on the part of our group to have someone doing something with us not knowing about it. He said, you know, this was started before the group was even, this had been started before the group had even formed, this task force had even formed, et cetera, et cetera. So as long as we know that's not the kind of thing we want to see going forward in the future, that we all keep each other informed going forward, that's the most important thing for me.
That's right.
And so again, Keith and I had a good exchange and that's how it ended. All right.
So one more that we know we wanted to raise, so Keith requested that this be raised again, and he was fine with us having this conversation without him. But he was looking through the written comments and he noticed a comment that was made by Jill Corey, that some of you might have seen, that essentially related to, and Anne, I'm gonna put you a little on the spot here. I know you're familiar with this, right? So this isn't a whole surprise. But the comment was around a presentation that Anne made to the historical committee, right? Around maps. And the suggestion in the comments is that this violated our no surprises ground rule, because the maps that Anne was presenting to the historical commission were not sort of an agreed set of maps from the task force, right? And so there was a request for a vote at that meeting, and I think Keith's concern about this is that we need to be consistent how we're applying our ground rules, and that this seems inconsistent with that. And you know, he had a request that he brought before us around presenting a presentation that he had come up with to the town body, and we said that we didn't feel comfortable with that.
Right.
So I think the issue here is just how do we, as a group, want to kind of clarify this ground rule and, you know, make sense of what happened, right? If that was in fact counter to what we want to do as a group. So I think, you know, it seems like appropriate to let Anne kind of share a little of the context here, and I think then have a conversation with the group about this issue. And Malcolm, you have your hand too. So Malcolm, why don't we hear from Anne, and then we can put you first in the queue after that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, so this came up at a previous meeting, I think it was in May, when I think it was Keith who's talking about a friends group presentation about the history of Warner's Pond. And, you know, and like we were just saying, I was a little surprised that it was happening outside of this group, which is actually addressing what's created to look at Warner's Pond. So I did hear about that and I attended the meeting, as I had said at our meeting. And you know, they had said a few things and I was like, that would be interesting. You know, everyone should be looking at the same facts. So I gathered, you know, I'm a historian. I was hired by the town to do history and to work with the Historical Commission, HTC and Community Preservation Committee. And so, so I gathered the maps and I told I started drafting a presentation. I told the Warner's Pond Task Group at that public meeting that that's what I was doing. And then I was bringing it before the Historical Commission, since it was their documents that were in question, that the Friends had misinterpreted the writings of the Historical Commission. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, if their Historical Commission documents are being questioned, they should have an opportunity to weigh in. And if they have more information to correct my draft, right? Like, this is what we do every day. This is why we exist. And that's what their job is by state law. It's to be in charge of historic resources in town. So I don't know, that this is my job. So it's a little bit different maybe for me because I am a town employee and I do have a job and I do work with these groups on a daily basis. So I'm not sure if how you all feel about that, whether that was a problem. whether I should have done it differently, but I mentioned it at that meeting and no one seemed to have any problem.
Yeah.
And including Keith, and I think it's in the minutes that he actually said he would love to see those maps, so. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I'm sorry if I didn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's go to
Malcolm.
Malcolm and then to Mark. Yeah, go ahead, Malcolm.
Oh, yeah, well, initially I was just going to say that I didn't see any difference at all between what Anne did and what Keith did, because Anne announced very clearly at the meeting that she was going to make a presentation to the Historical Society. And Keith announced that he was going to make a presentation, and I, for one, raised that I was uncomfortable about that. But nobody raised anything when Anne spoke up. So I don't see that there's any difference between the two pieces.
Did you raise it at this meeting? Or
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
But we never saw those maps. I guess maybe.
No,
part
we
of
did.
it is- We did? We saw your
Yeah,
maps?
in fact, she
before it went-
distributed them as hard copies,
Oh,
that's
I
how I
didn't- I missed
know.
that. I
Yeah.
don't remember getting those.
I think you might have been, I think you might have been.
They're on the website.
I think you came in late.
I missed them.
Yeah.
Mark, you want to try?
Yeah.
I just recognize that we have a lot of overlapping, adjacencies in work that's done. We talked about one involving me just earlier in this meeting with MCI Concord. And so that's gonna happen. I would also recognize that Anne, as a staff person assigned to this, is in a slightly different role. And, the development of resources and I would suggest that we add those maps or maybe some version with a little bit more explanation about the maps to our fact set here that, talk about the history of this pond, because I do think that it's important for us as an artifact of the work that we're doing here to cover that and, leave it for whoever's going to be dealing with the questions around this body of water in further history. So I recognize the difference there, and I think that in her role as a resource person, both the Historical Commission and to this body, it's completely appropriate for her to bring, especially, information that's really in her core set of expertise to both those groups and report about it, so.
I guess I'd be curious to hear about the stuff that the other historian presented at the Forensic One, because there's a historian from Yale who presented, I think, at that meeting at the library, and he had different take on some of it, so I'd be curious how we make sense of this history and that history. It'd be good to know, to put into the record, like.
He presented on the archaeology of Barrett's Farm. He didn't present anything on Warren's.
I wonder if there was some maps there. Oh, anyway, yeah.
No, not
Okay.
So Paul.
Paul, yeah,
Yeah.
Paul's his hand up. Paul?
Yeah, so I'm having a hard time to find the real problem here. As Mark indicated, there are a lot of adjacencies. I mean, my adjacencies, I have two: Recreation Commission, CPC. And at each Recreation Commission, I report back on what the task force is talking about. I think it's incumbent upon us not to misrepresent anything, but I'm not reporting anything that isn't in our minutes. So these adjacencies are real, and I'm not really seeing what the problem is.
Julia? So, I had something else.
Well, it doesn't sound like, it sounds like we've vetted it. I think that's about all you can do. I don't think there's anything else to be said. Thank you, Ann. I think I appreciate that. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next?
Delia?
Oh, Delia.
So can we just go back to the conversation on this memo that was received from DNF? And the memo says that it was the request from the Friends of Warner's Pond was received in March of 2024.
March, okay.
So I don't,
Yeah.
is that a typo or?
March of
Because our committee was established before that.
Before that, yeah, I don't know. I have to
Yeah.
talk, I'll have to talk more in depth to Keith.
Okay.
But again, his basic message was, yeah, we should have done that. So I'll have to talk to him.
But if it's not coming from Keith, Like, if that request didn't come from Keith, let's just say somebody else on Friends of Warner's Pond.
Yeah,
knew
he
somebody.
actually said somebody else on the.
It
board
was
spot.
somebody else, yes.
All right, so you know
Yeah,
more.
they can
No, I sent
reach
a
out to
letter.
their friends and they can reach out to acquaintances and ask for expertise without having to tell us, right?
But here's the thing, if you're,
Asking the
for
question.
example, Vicky, you're on, you know, for example,
Yeah.
you're on that. If you know about it and it's gonna impact the rest of this committee, why not just share that stuff? That there's,
yeah.
look, we've, you know, the Friends of Warner's Pond have invited someone to do such and such. Let us know, it doesn't
Yeah.
hurt anybody.
But it's not going against our charge or anything.
No, let's
I think it's a
uncomfortable.
little bit of, you know, not, we have a no surprises
Yeah, I
policy.
think
Yeah,
that
it's kind of Bruce.
I'm not saying I
It's
knew
horse
about it.
before the cart, because I know in Massachusetts, because our tribe is looking at lots of dams right now.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of orphan dams along the Blackstone River.
Yeah.
And we're going back to looking at maybe pulling them back and taking over them and taking them back into sort of our ownership. And then decide how we're gonna deal with them. But one of the things is, what really gets very clear is there's two things that happen with it. It goes back to ownership. I don't care who in the world goes and says, oh, I want a fish ladder put here. The dam owner gets the final say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, if they're putting, if a friends group was putting something together and then gonna approach the town and say, we'll pay for it. That's different than if they're going, oh, we're gonna do this and we're gonna ask the town to pay for it.
Mhm.
And I think those are two different
That's a good point.
But this is the
trajectories.
third one though. I think this one is, we got somebody to come in and tell us what we could do at this dam. And now we're putting it into the comments of the task force so that you have some additional information.
Correct.
It is not, we're not, I don't think that group ever asked for
But I
money
think
or
that-
raised money or anything.
I think where it becomes a very gray area is if it's doing it and then you're gonna ask the town for it, it should have come
Yeah.
to the task force ahead of time.
Yeah.
If you're doing it and proposing it that the association is gonna pay for it, that's takes it right off the table.
Yeah.
Because it was never even proposed,
Right.
it's just doing fact finding,
It's fact finding.
it's fact finding.
But
So I
here's the
think
other
it's
thing.
really that whole sort of
But here's my problem.
line.
We have talked about fish ladders and fish passages for months here, right? And we've been struggling with this, and no one said to us, oh, by the way, we're having we're having a group come and look at this, and we're gonna find out whether it's feasible. It would have been the simplest thing in the world, and it would have been in that whole general idea of the air of openness and trust
Yeah.
and appreciation, and you say, oh, we're looking at this. But there was nothing. It was dead silence during all those, and so it's like, oh, do we trust each other? You wouldn't say that to us, that this is being done? That seemed, that was the shocking part. The letter, good. I mean, I agree with you about money, but yeah. Oh, by the way, the letter though is supposed to enter into our records, which is to influence us as to what happens in the future, you know? So.
It's kind of like John's proposal too.
No, it's not.
Only the thing and it's
Because we
never
said-
works.
It's not the proposal, it's that wasn't brought up here.
So we'll, yeah, I think we've heard that now.
Liz or anyone else, are there any other comments about this? Because it's getting to be a very.
No, it's not. It isn't. This is, I don't think so. Oh, excuse me, wait.
No,
No, you, wait. I'm sorry, Rachel. This is where I said it. No, this is something we really wanted to bring up. We really, excuse me, and it was really important that we air it. And I think we got the answer that we're not gonna see that again. We're gonna make sure that all our organizations, that we're free and we're not talk openly with each other. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Bill, I completely agree with you.
All right,
and-
now one more
and-
thing, Bruce.
No, Bill, I
What?
completely agree with you, and I wasn't interrupting because I felt that it was getting argumentative or it was getting too long. I was asking whether there are other people in the group who had anything to say, because it was getting very much the same three.
I
people,
understand,
and I was
but
seeing other
but
people.
honestly, as a chair, I think I have a right to speak up.
Actually,
But, yeah, now Malcolm and then Bruce.
Oh, Liz.
You know, I
Oh, I'm
was
sorry.
nodding because I agreed.
Oh,
I'm a nodder. I'm sorry.
No, Malcolm, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I think that, I mean, personally, I don't have a problem that somebody from outside asked a question. It just seems to me that they didn't ask the right question. From our perspective, they asked a question about a single question about if they put a fish ladder in, what would the pond be able to do? And the fisheries group, I can't remember who they are, sort of said, well, we hadn't even really thought about it because it's a pond. And there are water quality issues that we really don't know anything about. But they didn't ask about the obvious other proposal, which is dam removal, and what would that do for the diadromous fish? And now we've got this opinion from experts about the pond. But now we have to go back to them to say, oh, we forgot to ask this bit. And that just feels, if it had been in coordination with us as a task force, we might have been able to do it as a single, interaction instead of multiple interactions.
Bruce was next.
I'm gonna yield to Jeff.
All right, Jeff? Jeff?
Thanks. Just echoing an element of Malcolm's comment that we've had great input, important input from DER, from other experts, and being respectful of those experts. I can imagine the folks at DMF, yeah, if we get that second request for, well, what would dam removal look like? They'd be like, oh, we already dealt with the first pond. Why are you coming back to us? So yeah, if we have these coordinated requests through our coordinating committee, I think we'll be working more efficiently with partners and experts that can help our process.
Bruce?
So lastly, I want to just sort of echo what Malcolm said, was we're not asking the right questions at the moment because they might not be in front of us at the moment. Right? A lot of times we take it, we think about it, we digest it, and then we put it back. And that's what the steering committee is for. And I think maybe it's not even coming back to the steering committee. And the fact of we may not be thinking about it in defense of Keith, I'm not thinking about it at the time because it was already, it came to me. It came to me, I was just dealing with it.
Yeah, okay.
So it's like, we just have to be cognizant. I think it gets back to sort of our original working agreement that we always have to be cognizant of what's in the best interest of what this group, the task force, is deemed.
I agree.
And at all times. So it's like, if it comes to our attention immediately, then that's the moment you make the call, not as it's happening.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I'd like to make a little suggestion, in terms of how we spend our meeting time, right? We designated this time, task force issues of interest, member issues of interest. This is a great space. We'll have this in every meeting from now moving forward. If there's something going on with your constituency or a group that you're a part of, right? Or a committee you're on that relates to our work, that this is the moment to share it. Right? Let everyone know. Right, and we now have designated time for that, right? So from this point forward, hopefully all of that will be brought into every meeting.
I agree. Paul, you had your hand raised. Did you take it down again, or something you wanted to say? Yes.
I was just saying that we're talking about the past. I think moving forward, we've established a structure through the subgroups to kind of ask these questions of the right people. So putting aside everything before, I think from this point forward, I think it's up to the subgroups what information they need and what questions to ask, and hopefully we'll ask the right questions. That's an obvious point, but I want to look forward on this whole issue.
I agree with that. That makes sense.
So Bill, I think we're good with this. Just time for public comment.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah.
So as always, be as kind to each other as we have been with each other. And we ask you this, that's right. Then we ask if there's any public comments, ask you to keep it within a couple of minutes, identify yourselves. So please, anyone have a public comment? One up here? Yes?
Anna, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Anna.
Okay.
Yes.
Anna Feldwig, 343 Commonwealth Avenue. I think I can put to rest what happened with Brad Chase. I reached out to him in mid-November 2023, before the task force exists. And he said, and I asked him, would he come take a look at Warner's Pond Dam with regard to fish passage? And he said yes. But then we emailed back and forth, emailed back and forth, emailed back and forth. Finally, in May, he called me last minute and said, I'm taking my son to visit a college. I'm passing by Concord. I can come see the dam on Saturday. And I said, great. And I grabbed Keith, and that's how it happened. I wanted him to come talk to the group, but he said it wasn't that important. I mean, he doesn't actually feel Warner's Pond Dam is very relevant until Talbot's Mill Dam comes down. And he was willing to submit a letter. And that's all he was willing to do. So that's how that all happened. I hope that clarifies things.
It does, thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, John?
Yeah, John Coleman, 65 Central Street. I want to thank you for bringing up the side channel pond discussion. I thought that that idea was completely dead. I will say that I think that the berms would do a lot better if the dam were left in place. And you don't have to have substantial berms at all. In fact, the berms could be perhaps replaced with just a turbidity curtain set up from a float system that would delineate a portion of the pond that you want to keep separate from stream. That might work out very well in a deepened area by the row part, which could be a swimming area. And surrounded by turbidity fence to keep the nutrients and the sediment out of that area. And to try it, it'd be very inexpensive compared to creating berms. And if it worked well, you could expand it perhaps to a bigger area. Or if it didn't work, you could take it out. It wouldn't be a big deal. So as you're, considering options in the various committees and stuff, might consider that.
Thank you. That's very good. Thank you, John. Yes.
Yeah, actually, so I do have a public comment, Miguel Chavari, 255 Commonwealth Ave, and it's just more procedural. So basically, that presentation from the EA was based on, what he had proposed. So maybe he should have been given the opportunity to ask questions or respond to EA right after it happened, instead of doing the public comments. So since it was based on his ideas.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments? Oh, should we end the meeting? Are we ready to finish?
Although, can I just ask?
Yes, yeah, but
Sorry, the groups now should email each other to try to schedule the next meeting. Am I?
yes, I think
okay,
so,
okay.
yeah.
So-
But I'm hoping the next meeting, right, we're gonna spend a lot of time in small groups.
Yes,
Right, okay.
well, no, we're gonna meet in between now and.
Yeah, you're right, that's
Yeah,
true
yeah.
too.
The next week we'll be-
Like, we might be meeting next week
Yeah.
with our.
So can I make the suggestion out loud right now that even if we adjourn now, that we then maybe at least huddle and try and see if we can find a
Schedule.
date for
That's okay.
for a first, yeah, I think that's okay, because
Schedule.
that's about agenda and scheduling and.
Good.
And,
Yeah, half our
that would be the, yeah, so,
It's gonna be hard for the Zoom people.
yeah,
I
I'm
think we'll
just saying
email
that,
you. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying that we could end the meeting from a recording perspective and then maybe just hang out for 2 or 3 more minutes to try and, and take maybe each group can poll itself, and if somebody wants to watch that happen, that's fine, but just a little coordination might facilitate, considering that it is the summer and it's hard to get people together.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Victor, I just wanted, just to make sure there's not a misunderstanding. We wanted the work group should get together between now and
And the next
August,
meeting.
outside of the meeting.
Right, yes.
We don't know if we're gonna convene the work groups within a task force
Right,
meeting,
right.
if that's not decided. Even if we were allowed or we want to do that.
Yeah, we need,
We will check in with the work groups in August and hear from you in front of a large group.
So we shouldn't plan on using some of. that
Don't
time.
plan on using
Yeah.
task force meeting time for your
Or
work groups
meeting.
unless you hear otherwise. We will let you know.
Plan on meeting
Yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it could be a conflict. They
Yeah,
could
yeah,
get
right.
complicated.
Yeah, right.
So you're just gonna, you're clarity about how we can do this.
Yes.
All right, okay, got it.
And can I?
Does each subcommittee decide how frequently they meet? I mean, as Vicky was saying.
Yes.
Once a week.
Good luck.
Every morning at 5 AM.
I don't know.
Glad I'm not gonna be.
Now, can I just report about the chestnut thing that happened?
Yes, please.
So I want to just first give a big shout out to Oars and to Friends of Warner's Pond, because they talked together
Oh, good.
about a cleanup in Warner's Pond, and a cleanup was scheduled, and it was primarily abutters. I want to give a shout out to the abutters who came. There were about 20 people, including young, very young children in their own kayaks, and they spent 2 to 3 hours, and it looks like we almost got every water chestnut out of that piece of the pond, so limited thousands of water chestnuts from going down the river system, and I just want to give everybody Anna, who was there, did an extraordinary job lifting very heavy bags of.
That's great. That's very good. Very nice.
We'll take one more public comment.
All right, yes.
I paddled Warner's Pond yesterday and I don't know what it looked like before. I'm sure it was much worse, but there's still an awful lot of water chestnut.
Oh, good, we're going out again in 2 weeks. So come, anyone who wants to come and collect them, August 3rd, we're doing it again.
But that's really not a problem in Warner's Pond.
Okay, no, that's enough. Good.
I thought it was good news.
No, good news. It's very
Yeah, I
good
thought it
news.
was
That's excellent news.
All
Are you
right,
done?
and Jeff had something to say. Oh, he was.
Clapping. He's just clapping.
Okay, so with no further business, the meeting is adjourned at
Thank you.
7:30.